Chapter 301, Tiankai Eternal Life. A certain young Feet Herman warrior, looking utterly disheartened, had left, leaving behind only the treasure he received as payment, still emanating a tempting luster. Duo Lai put away the treasure, glancing around once more. The featherman still bore a dumbfounded and foolish appearance, and it slipped into contemplation. Could it be that I, Ben Duo, exerted too much strength? But it was clearly you who told me to give it my all. Duo Lai felt wronged. Moreover, this guy was a bit too weak. Although he was already an imagery level half-step warrior, he conceded after barely a couple of exchanges. This does seem a bit weak, but it's not a lack of strength, rather a lack of fighting will and experience. Yuan, through the snippets of Duo Lai's words, could also make a rough judgment. Behaviors like standing still after launching a big move and only feeling fear when trapped all highlighted this featherman's lack of combat experience, which was very scarce. The experience of fighting for his life could well be zero. This wasn't surprising, as Featherman's hometown had been sealed off for a long time, without external contact. And within the Featherman's hometown, the number of feathermen was actually limited, and a martial spirit didn't seem to prevail either. Yu Baishan's stats might not be shabby, possibly on par with demonic flame Wang Qi, but compared to the latter, his experience and will fell far short. Moreover, these feathermen seem to be indigenous inhabitants, not born from a military breed. Compared to the bred warriors, they naturally possess self-awareness, have undergone years of learning, and can undertake many jobs besides fighting. However, compared to military breeds, they also have disadvantages, lacking innate combat valor and the heart to forge ahead on the path of battle. One could refer to Daisy for more details. When Daisy reaches the 4-order peak, her stats will definitely be higher than those of this Feet Herman warrior, but her comprehensive combat power should not be expected to be substantial. Yuan was actually hoping to establish an alliance with the Feet Herman dynasty, as in regions surrounded by monster power, any vitality force is a natural ally. However, the Feet Herman dynasty did not seem to have any interest in cooperation. Forget an alliance, even basic trade was not something the Feet Herman dynasty was prepared to engage in. Even though their territory was quite small and there must inevitably be some resource shortages despite being self-sufficient. Yuan could somehow understand this. This place was deep in the wilderness, and just the fact that they could survive was a commendable feat. Over the span of decades, centuries, or even more extended periods, they might have grown accustomed to this mode of survival. Yet, such a mode of survival could only ensure temporary safety. In Yuan's view, it was akin to a slow death. Of course, he was simply an outsider and not fully aware of the true situation of the Feet Herman dynasty. Who knows, perhaps the Feet Herman dynasty was preparing some grand scheme. It is said that our Feet Herman dynasty was extremely glorious hundreds of years ago and constructed numerous sky cities. Yu Rongjiu introduced the Feet Herman dynasty's glorious history. However, while he talked about these historical events, he lacked a sense of reality. He and his generation, including the older and even older generations, had opened their eyes in Featherman's hometown. Regarding the once supposedly glorious Feet Herman dynasty, they could only grasp fragments from historical records. Sometimes they even wondered if such a world truly existed. It was precisely because they saw the vast world and broad expanses described in records that they were unwilling to confine themselves to a small corner. Feathermen were meant to soar high in the sky. Now, they were only like small birds with broken wings, trapped in a web. I am very eager to communicate and interact with your Tianyuan territory, it's just that Her Majesty the Queen has no such desire, and I dare not disobey, he said, his gaze involuntarily drifting in the direction Yu Baisheng had left, looking far into the distance. This young generation's strongest, a leader of the radical faction, was one of the rare few who dared to go against the Queen's command. However, Yu Baisheng seemed to have suffered a massive blow. Before he left, he was muttering disconsolately about danger. The outside world is indeed too dangerous. Seeing this, not only was it unlikely he would continue to lead the radical faction, it was feared he would become even more conservative than the conservative faction itself. A few hours later, Duo Lai left Featherman's hometown with a communication token in his possession. Behind him, space rippled faintly. The entire entrance to the Feet Herman dynasty, along with the outdoor structure Vitality Spirit Spring, vanished without a trace. No matter how much Duo Lai looked, he could not find the slightest discord in the space. Without the location pinpointed by the guide compass, even Duo Lai would hardly be able to find that entrance again. This showed that the Feet Herman dynasty's method of concealment was extremely sophisticated. After all, the Feet Herman dynasty was a great nation before the cataclysm occurred, Yuan believed, despite many feathermen being skeptical about their own history. After verifying from multiple sources, there indeed used to be a Feet Herman dynasty in history. Following the fall of the Feet Herman dynasty, this featherman's hometown could very well be one of the remnants of the surviving populace of the Feet Herman dynasty. It might even be the only surviving group. Setting aside their strength, they surely possessed an abundant heritage. Lord Shepherd also expressed envy. He wished to conceal the Tianyuan territory like the Feet Herman dynasty, re-emerging only after Duo Lai, Dead Bone and other generals ascended to legendary status. Unfortunately, he lacked such heritage. So he could only try to settle the surrounding instabilities as much as possible. Feet Herman dynasty, at the palace. A young female Feet Herman, with a complex expression, walked in here. She was a leader of the conservative faction among the attack feathermen, like Yu Beizheng, a descendant of Her Majesty the Queen. My Queen, are we really not going to cooperate with this human force? This is the only vitality force we have encountered in decades, and we can't miss this opportunity. How could I not know? A hoarse voice emerged slowly from the depths of the court. In the shadows, the Feet Herman Queen walked forth. Her gait was elegant and her dress was luxurious, each movement exuding the reverence and nobility befitting a queen. However, behind the Feet Herman Queen, where one would expect holy and magnificent white wings, lay patchy and faded feathers, sparsely distributed. Some feathers even drifted to the ground as she walked, torn and scattered by the interplay of light and shadow. Her face was wrinkled, like withered old tree bark. People could only infer from her silhouette that the queen must have been a beauty in her youth, but now, the charm was gone, leaving only age. Actually, she was not so old, just over 100 years. Feathermen have longer lifespans than humans, and legendary beings enjoy even longer lives. For a Feet Herman Queen, her age meant she was barely more than a youngster. Nonetheless, she had suffered a severe injury, a wound to her very essence. It had yet to heal even now. Her lifespan was severely diminished as a result. And this was the price for venturing into the outside world. The Cobra Overlord and the Wolf Overlord are extremely terrifying. It is still uncertain whether this human force can survive and for how long. It is possible that they could perish tomorrow. Cooperating with a vitality force that could be annihilated at any moment is pointless and could even pose a threat to our Feet Herman kingdom. Let's wait until they manage to survive first. That was also why she had instructed General Sop to reveal information about the surrounding forces. Only those who could survive amid the surrounding overlords had the qualifications to cooperate with her Feet Herman kingdom. Boom, boom, boom. Outside Shilling Town, the roaring blasts followed one after another, artillery shelling filled the skies, monstrous bodies were ripped apart, while more creatures emerged from the horizons, their fierce teeth bared, pouncing towards the town. This is already the 26th large-scale monster wave we've encountered these days. Additionally, 19 players have gone missing in the wild, presumed to have met with mishaps. In the town's command center, an official player reported. Mayor Kui Long's face tensed slightly. The missing players were mostly those who had ventured out to explore on their own. Despite issuing various warnings, some players who were not selected for the official exploratory team still deemed themselves exceptional and insisted on delving into the wilderness, and they could not be stopped. The existence of our Shilling Town has likely been exposed to many monster powers. We cannot view these monster powers through old perspectives and experiences. He addressed the other lords at the meeting, pausing to say, the monster tribes we've faced in the past were mostly established within a few years, and although their leaders held wisdom, it was limited. During the Red Fog disaster moon, we confronted some high-order intelligent monsters, but those beings, corrupted by the Red Fog, had sunk into near insanity, with little wisdom remaining. But now, the intelligent monsters around us, they understand mining, enslaving, and even military training. They might be secretly plotting against us. Shilling Town was no small settlement, with numerous buildings and imposing walls. Such a town suddenly appearing in the wilderness naturally attracted a lot of attention. Even if Mayor Kui Long wished to take some measures for concealment, there was nothing that could be done. Moreover, there were numerous players in Shilling Town, who could not be completely controlled. Players were a massive force, but the traces they left behind also made Shilling Town even more exposed. No matter what, players could not be controlled as easily as soldiers. But it was precisely because Shilling Town had high-level players and veteran lords that Mayor Kui Long was quickly able to get a decent understanding of the surrounding territories. Currently, there are 9 discovered Taishan territories, and the furthest is 390 kilometers away from our Shilling town. But this distance is shorter than before the Great Change. Furthermore, there have been 26 monster tribes discovered, among which 3 have very large scales. Raging Blade Lord has assessed that these 3 large tribes each have several 4th-order bosses in command. He projected several photographs. The most striking among them was a wall over 20 meters tall. The wall was brownish-red, not particularly well constructed, as if it had been built from piles of crushed flesh. Not far from the wall, one could vaguely make out the eerie and towering spires of the Tower of Flesh and Blood. This scale was fitting for a monster city. Many high-level players and veteran lords were astonished. They had heard that this was a large tribe dominated by half-orcs. They were accustomed to half-orcs, but never had they seen such a bizarre half-orc tribe. It was not a matter of size. It felt strange, unreasonable, and eerie. Mayor Kui Long, Raging Blade Lord, and a few others were also seeing such a monster power for the first time. However, having higher status and more powerful acquaintances, they had some awareness of it. Rumors say that the monsters also have their own factions. Some monsters worship the fallen god and craft totem pillars, which are indicative of the fallen god faction. There are also those at the pinnacle of the wisdom monsters establishing the monster kingdom and ruling countless minions. Among them, a monster kingdom known as Tiankai Eternal Life worships and pursues eternal life through flesh. The half-beast tribe we face is likely one of its minions. These are not like regular monsters, they are more corrupted. Half-orcs are merely their external shells, their true nature is probably that of mutated flesh monsters. And what Tiankai Eternal Life is best at, is creating aggregated monsters. When Kui Long spoke of this, many lords and high-level players already showed a slight change in their expressions. They had all encountered aggregated monsters and knew well their horrors. The leader of the Silver Mercenary Corps recalled an encounter in the Land of Two Realms more than half a month ago. They had come across a colossal being, an aggregation of tens of thousands of snake men. So the question arose, did the Snake Man settlement believe in the Snake God and belong to the fallen god faction, or had they merged into flesh and fallen under the sway of Tiankai Eternal Life? Mayor Kui said, since this tribe is a minion of Tiankai Eternal Life, even if there's no legendary realm presence, they will surely possess aggregated monsters that far surpass the 4th order peak, even those strong enough to be on the dragon list. Even relying on several defensive constructions of the excellence tier, we would have difficulty holding out. For this reason, I plan to conduct the promotion trial for Shilling Town ahead of schedule, and I will leave the remaining defense tasks to all of you. In the depths of the wilderness, inside a vast jackal man tribe, a burly goblin clad in exquisite treasure armor walked out. By his side, a similarly robust jackal man accompanied him. But unlike most within the tribe, this jackal man's fur was a strange scarlet hue, and his muscles seemed to undulate on their own, as though they had a life of their own. The Goblin Prince looked deeply at this legendary werewolf and strode away. It has come to this after all. I obtained the heart of the nest in the Land of Two Realms, but to restore the glory of the Goblin Kingdom, relying solely on myself is far from enough. He had found an ally, but a legendary warrior of Taishan cut him down with a single sword strike, leaving him once again on his own. He engraved this grudge in his heart. He had been relentlessly pursued by the Sword Saint Tian He. He remembered this vendetta once more. The downfall of the Goblin Kingdom was at the hands of the Taishan Alliance. He etched this third great enmity into his memory. Recently, the merging of the two realms caused some changes in the peripheries of the Taishan Alliance. The Goblin Prince found himself relocated deeper into the wilderness, which allowed him to escape the pursuit of Sword Saint Tian He. Clearly, fate was with him. When the Goblin Kingdom's glory is rebuilt, that will be the time for my return and vengeance. But before that, I must, albeit reluctantly, borrow the power of Tiankai Eternal Life and become a part of it. He did not want to. Under the shroud of red mist, there were 3 forces. First was the fallen god, second was the monster kingdom, and his Goblin Kingdom was the third type. They were originally living beings too, who fell from grace due to the disaster and became corrupted. He always believed that they were entirely different from the monsters born from the nest of filth and the red mist. They were the real individuals. Thus, the Goblin Kingdom perished. The Goblin Prince came to realize, embrace the flesh, and you shall have eternity. Next, I must find a suitable sacred place to settle this heart of the nest. Thinking this, he strode southward. Chapter 302, The Goblin Prince, A Path to Certain Death. Tianyuan Territory, Staff of Divine Right. Inside the colossal furnace, surrounded by 9 flowing torrents where light and shadow interweaved, a curtain aglow with star sand was fluttering. Beautiful, dreamlike. The second generation concealment skill has finally been created. Ilo wiped the sweat from her forehead. While the fusion of techniques wasn't her main academic interest, after so many days and nights, the creation of this large-scale magic filled her with a great sense of accomplishment. Next to her, Yuan and General Duolai were truly drenched in sweat, looking thoroughly drained. Duolai had even transformed into a jelly pancake, sprawled out flat on the ground. Cool, so cool. Didn't want to get up anymore. Duo had given it everything. After all, the initial fusion determined the limit of the technique, so it dared not slacken in the slightest. Afterwards, however, it got easier. It was just a matter of extracting energy from the small energy stones to power the Staff of Divine Right. Lord Shepherd had to put in even greater effort since he had to not only manage energy output but also perform some of the intricate operations during the technique's fusion, resulting in both physical and mental exhaustion. However, when you consider it, the 3 of them working together to create a technique that could be called perfect and top-tier, overexertion was to be expected. Usually, the work of research and fusion for such a technique would require a team of over 100 elite mages to execute. And yet, the final product would not be nearly as good as what the 3 of them had accomplished. The second-generation concealment technique, building on the basis of the night illusory curtain and incorporating the river of stars and starry eyes, not only makes the whole technique more natural and prolongs its duration, but it also significantly enhances the concealment of life essence. Moreover, under this technique, Tianyuan territory is also greatly resistant to divination and predictions. Aside from having a higher cost than before, it had no flaws. But even this cannot be said to be a flaw of the technique, it's Lord Mu's shortcoming. He's broke. If soul sand were used as the energy source, this technique would burn through 100 soul crystal coins a day. Even the Great Lord couldn't sustain that. Sustaining it would make his heart ache like it was being sliced with a knife. Thank goodness for the small energy stones. Large-scale magic, night-hidden starry sky. Under the Lord's vision, this concealment skill appeared like a starry canopy covering the sky of Tianyuan territory. With specks of starlight flowing and converging into rivers, occasionally an eye or two would open upon the curtain of stars, roll its eyeballs, and then plunge back into the abyss. Though it was a tad strange, it didn't matter as long as it was practical. Apart from the Lord's perspective and the hero's vision, ordinary people, even fourth-order strongmen or beings in the legendary realm, would not be able to witness such a spectacle. Under the cover of night-hidden starry sky, Tianyuan territory seemed to vanish into a rift in space, invisible and undetectable. Fourth-order strongmen would need to be within a few kilometers to sense something was amiss. Of course, it was different for those in the legendary realm. Beings in the legendary realm could control the power of heaven and earth and might spot the anomaly from afar. As for how far, Yuan couldn't be sure. He wasn't a legend and had never experienced the wonders of that power. Regardless, the concealment offered by night-hidden starry sky is quite ingenious and shouldn't cause problems in the short term. After all, the wilderness is vast, and the nearest major tribe is hundreds of kilometers away. Yuan didn't plan to maintain it for too long. The small energy stones he had wouldn't last forever. But it should be enough until Duolai ascended to legendary, right? He thought. As a devouring slime, Duolai recovered very quickly. After lying flat on the cool floor for half an hour, it sprang up lively and spirited. It began its daily tasks. Eat. Strike through, train. Not picky about its diet to ensure a swift pace in its training, Duolai ate almost anything, including minerals, plants, and crystals. Nowadays, most of Tianyuan territory's material income was going into Duolai's stomach. However, since Tianyuan territory had cut off trade with the outside world and couldn't engage in business with the Feet Herman Kingdom, the materials income was effective. The main income came from monsters' tributes. While there were plenty of monster materials, relying solely on devouring monster components could lead to an imbalanced diet, with a limited increase in basic attributes by the end of the day. To raise the upper limit of the daily training benefits, the only option was. After battling for half a day, Duolai hustled to a small soul sand mine 100 kilometers away, covered and concealed, while the sky grew dim. Glancing left and right, with no people or monsters around, Duolai used its rarely deployed earth-based ability to slowly burrow into the ground, reaching the depths of the mine. Time to eat. This soul sand mine was buried deep, making excavation difficult and noisy, so Lord Mu had decided not to mine it until the situation in the surroundings had truly stabilized. He just let Duo Lai nibble at it from time to time. Nibbling was much easier for Duo Lai, it didn't matter if it was ordinary rock, raw soul sand, or rich soul sand deposits, it simply swallowed them down for digestion without any fuss. Silently, Duo Lai gnawed a large hole into the mine deep underground. This was training. The other commanders of Tianyuan territory were also in training, whether they were leveling up, refining skills, deepening artistic conceptions, or practicing through sparring, the territory was alive with martial vigor. There was no need for the Great Lord to urge them at all. In the west, at the Skeleton Cemetery, Bone 2, calling himself the second strongest after Emperor Dead Bone, was teaching some elite skeletons who had just awakened their self-awareness. I can recall the days when our territory was nothing more than a few thatched cottages. We, alongside Brother Dead Bone, stepped into the forest, combating a variety of enemies that seemed very strong back then. It all feels like it was just yesterday. Bone 2 seemed like an old skeleton, lost in reminiscence. Back then, I was merely a little skeleton warrior, facing a group of gargoyles far beyond my level. Yet I, Bone 2, was fearless, crashing into them with a sliding tackle. A group of green-hand skeletons shouted, "Bone 2 is brave, Bone 2 is mighty." At last, another skeleton asked, "And then what?" "And then?" Cough. After that, under my valiant combat, we turned the tables despite being weaker and gave those gargoyles a good beating, earning our territory its first pot of gold. Cough cough, of course, all credit goes to Boss Dead Bone's steady command, and the Lord's wise decisions. At this, Bone 2 let out a sigh. It had been a long time since they had fought side by side with Boss Dead Bone. Not long ago, Boss Dead Bone went alone to the north to scout the situation of the surrounding monster tribes, while they had to stay behind in the territory, training the other skeletons. By now, Boss Dead Bone might be battling powerful monster enemies. And they can't be there to help? That's just unreasonable. Bone 2 sought out Bone 4, determined to become stronger and catch up with the boss's pace. Bone 4 glanced at him, "Is there any chance that the boss doesn't bring you because you are too rash and might hinder his stealth?" "Impossible, absolutely impossible." Bone 2 clanged his sword to the ground and then dutifully picked it up again. There was no persuading a single-minded skeleton like Bone 2, and Nigolasi was well aware of this. Bone 2 was just too impulsive, brimming with bravery but lacking in caution, failing to learn even a bit of the boss's steady spirit. Bone 4 pulled out a book. "This is the Beginner's Guide to Steadiness, a beginner's book from the Steady series written by the boss. You should read it more when you've got nothing else to do." Bone 4 strongly disagreed with Bone 2's rashness, often using it as a cautionary example, a warning to himself. However, Bone 4 deeply agreed with Bone 2's earlier sentiment about it becoming increasingly difficult to fight alongside the boss. Just because the boss ventured deep into the wilderness without them, didn't mean they could allow themselves to fall behind. In fact, they were not falling behind. By now, they had become commanders capable of leading their own armies. Oh, not Bone 2, he didn't have the command ability. But they aspired to give their own strength when the boss was facing formidable foes. Our Death Remains territory can serve as a power booster for the boss during war, but that alone is far from enough. Under a few months' management, their territory had grown considerably, sprawling across the wasteland like a white bone wilderness, roamed by a variety of skeletal creatures. Little skeletons, skeleton soldiers, skeleton warriors, skeleton mages, skeleton archers, skeleton knights, and so on. But as a power booster, 10 territories of Bone 4 would still not compare to one Wraith Sacred Mountain owned by the boss. What use were they then? So, under the Lord's foresight and Boss Dead Bone's wise command, they had started developing combination techniques early on. The problem was, many of these techniques were quickly obsolete due to frequent updates. Except for this one. No matter how the updates change, our Death Remains territory is the absolute core of the tactical system. Come on, Brother Bone 2, let us create the ultimate combination technique. Only by doing so can we keep up with the boss and fight alongside him. The principle of the combination technique was simple. Merging the territories of Death Remains. The territories of the Skeleton series, the Phantom series Ghost Market, and the Treeman series I Am the Forest all held the potential for transformation through combination and fusion, to achieve a metamorphosis through quantitative change. That was the theory, but actual realization was not easy and could only be achieved through continuous blending and practice. That alone was not enough. Merging two territories could only produce a 1+1 effect. But what Bone 4 sought to achieve was 1+1 times 1+1. Lacking the boss's astounding genius, he could only try to achieve this through time and repeated attempts. First is the merging of territories, and second, we must harness the power of Army Soul Resonance. Army Soul Resonance was not as simple as mere addition. Today's Yuan territory, including the three of them, had a total of 14 skeleton lords. Bone 4 had long attempted combinations in pairs, in threes, and in fours. The greater the number of fusions, the less stable it became, the more prone to collapse. In severe cases, it could even damage the very foundation of their Death Remains territory. Therefore, Bone 4, who had inherited the steady spirit, would not attempt a majority fusion without 99.8% certainty. And today, the time was ripe. All 14 skeleton lords raised their bone greatswords toward the sky and shouted in unison. Death Remains territory, combine. Times 14. On the furthest west of Yuan territory, adjacent to the city walls, one wasteland after another burying countless skeletons, appeared out of thin air. These wastelands, even the smallest, were as large as a small village. The largest wasteland once unfolded was comparable to a small town-level territory. Only now, these Death Remains territories appeared as miniature maps, suspended above the heads of each skeleton lord. There were three largest Death Remains territories, arranged in A formation, sketching out a triangular shape. Cultured Bone 4 knew well that the triangle was the most stable structure. The remaining Death Remains territories of various sizes were scattered randomly around. They seemed disordered, but were actually strategically placed in a mysterious array, scattered among them like stars across a chessboard. At this moment, Bone 4 was like a conductor in an orchestra, coordinating everyone with a unique rhythm. Under its command, the Death Remains territories slowly underwent changes. The edges of some territories became elongated, the centers of others slightly rose to form small hills, a corner of others indented inward. If viewed from higher above, it would be discovered that the edges of many adjacent territories resembled two meticulously designed gears, ready to interlock perfectly at any moment. But these territories did not merge together. Within various Death Remains territories, skeleton creatures crawled out from the ground one after another, gathered at the center, and their jaw bones clicked up and down making caw-caw-caw cries, as if reciting some incantation. They lacked spiritual wisdom, but they were extensions of the powers of the various skeleton lords, part of each respective lord. The chanting grew louder, eventually carrying out of their domains, intertwining and resonating with each other under a unique rhythm. A black fog surged, covering the skies above each Death Remains territory. In the vagueness, each white bone wilderness seemed to expand a little. No, not seemingly, under the coordination of the mysterious rhythm and the resonance and contact between the territories, each Death Remains territory began to expand. The barren earth spread inch by inch. Grim bone fragments, like young sprouts, grew and pierced through the soil. After a matter of seconds, 14 Death Remains territories truly merged together, forming a vast white bone wilderness. The merging of the Death Remains territories was not the end, just the beginning. In the blink of an eye, the entire white bone wilderness began to spread and expand at a speed much faster than before, countless times so. The grim white bones across the wilderness grew as if they were injected with steroids. In just a moment, large swathes of white bone forest had formed. This place was no longer a white bone wilderness, it had become a white bone forest. A cold, spectacular white bone forest spread out. The vast bone forest exuded an awe-inspiring coercion, a place that could both transmit deep, oceanic energy and bring extremely horrifying augmentation to the various skeleton lords. It even possessed a terrifying, indescribable suppressive power. Big is strong, big is beautiful. Through fusion and evolution, the scope of the entire white bone forest had even surpassed that of General Dead Bones' Wraith Sacred Mountain. Of course, this power was not real, it was also borrowing the power of Army Soul Resonance. Once the time was up, they would revert back to their original state. No matter if they revert or not, just ask if Mr. Skull is impressive right now. Impressive, very impressive. Serio, swaying its tail, exclaimed in amazement. It was just a little brother dragon, what else could it do if not echo along? And to be honest, the coercion spreading from the white bone forest was indeed terrifying. If the entire forest bore down on it, Serio even doubted it could move a single dragon claw. So terrifying. Wait, if Bone 2 and the others have become this strong, how can it continue to be the frost giant dragon above all undead, but beneath only one skull? It seemed that its group status had dropped again. Serio fell into contemplation. Bone 2 looked at Bone 4, our divine powers are now fully accomplished. It's time to leave our seclusion and lend a hand to boss, right? Charge, let's join boss and slaughter the enemies chaotically. Bone 4, since when did you get the delusion that boss needs anyone's help? Impossible, absolutely not. It seemed rather true. Bone 2 once again fell into contemplation. At the same time, in the northern part of the Tianyuan territory, an overwhelmingly powerful being was striding through the air. Making no attempt to conceal himself, where he passed, monster tribe either bowed their heads in submission or trembled in fear, none daring to bare their fangs at him. Because he was the king among goblins, he was the monster king. He stationed high in the sky, surveying his surroundings as if the world was his hunting ground. He spread his domain across thousands of kilometers, searching for a precious land that suited his needs. This area won't do either. The same here, this place has been under the rule of 2 overlords for decades, all the desirable spots have been taken. But I need the support of the wolf overlord, and I can't choose a lair too far away. Moreover, to the east, the great river roars into the sea, mysterious and unknown. To the west, the red leaf forest was said to be the domain of the Blood Tree King. That was a legendary realm existence far more powerful than he, even stronger than Sword Saint Tian He, and he certainly wouldn't provoke it. Beyond the red leaf forest further to the west, there seemed to be overlord powers occupying the area as well. The only choice he had was here. The Goblin Prince stepped slowly through the air, opening his domain after covering a certain distance to sweep the surroundings. Domain probing, although not omnipotent, was far more reliable than the information one could get from eyes and ears. As an old legendary realm being, the Goblin Prince's mastery of domain usage was expert, if not at its peak. At the same time, General Deadbone was walking silently between the mountains and forests. His steps seemed slow, but he actually traversed hundreds of kilometers in the blink of an eye. Where he passed, either the monsters had no detection, or they were annihilated on the spot without leaving the slightest trace of combat. I have already carried out a probing attack on the Jackal Man tribe, and they took me for another monster, without detecting anything wrong, but I also wasn't able to probe much information about the Wolf Overlord backing the Jackal Man tribe. All clues indicated that the existence of the Wolf Overlord was real. Yet, the location of the Wolf Overlord remained a mystery. Unlike the conspicuous large tribes, the Wolf Overlord had hidden itself very deeply. This indeed is a very tricky and dangerous enemy. Without eradicating this formidable foe, his mind couldn't be at peace. Of course, he would need to devise a long-term plan, as he was, after all, too weak and lacking in strength. To pinpoint the headquarters of the Wolf Overlord and Cobra Overlord, Deadbone also had some ideas. The simplest strategy was tracking. The Overlord power rearing these monster tribes certainly didn't do it for nothing. These monster tribes, visible on the outside, monitored all sides and controlled various resource-rich lands. The Sephora Forest, the Black Iron Veins, the Sharp Crystal. In these days, Deadbone had discovered several monster tribe-controlled resource lands. The rare items mined and collected from these sites couldn't possibly be for the tribe leader's personal enjoyment alone, they must be supplied to the overlords above. Including the resources obtained from those few outdoor structures. By tracking the supply teams, it was possible to find the headquarters of the overlord power. This plan might not be feasible, but Deadbone had prepared several alternative plans, ready to be tested one by one. Suddenly, as if a ripple spread through the air, the whole forest fell dead silent for a moment, and then as if nothing had happened, the roaring of monsters resumed in the distance. An illusion? It was not. It's a domain. Deadbone was certain of it. The Goblin Prince's mountain domain didn't reveal itself completely, as a legendary figure who had cultivated in this realm for quite a long time, he knew how to use his domain subtly. Just like now, he simply used his domain as his eyes, spreading it thinly to significantly reduce consumption. At the same time, the entire domain became formless and invisible, like a gentle breeze. But it still couldn't escape Deadbone's perception. He was not only certain that a vast domain was engulfing the forest, but he also found this domain quite familiar. He had seen this domain from afar. Deadbone stood still as the silence of stone. Behind him, a bone eye quietly emerged, gazing in the direction the domain had come from. His gaze seemed to bend, piercing through the layers of leaves and branches, and spotted the goblin figure standing high in the azure sky, godlike and demonic. A goblin legend. This was the third time Deadbone had seen this legendary figure. What was he doing? He seemed to be lingering persistently. Was he searching for the Tianyuan territory? He must have nefarious plans. He already had the path to death. Chapter 303, The Realm of the Mortal, a match for legend. Tianyuan territory. Mu Yuan sat in the cultivation quiet room, his eyes closed in meditation. Through his cultivation, he had managed to relieve some of the tension that had been building up these past days. After the second generation of the large-scale concealment techniques were developed, Lord Shepherd could finally catch his breath. Next, all they had to do was to wait, accumulate, and prepare. He rested for no more than half an hour before he was suddenly jolted awake. He had received a message from Deadbone. To this day, the core framework of Tianyuan territory was already in place, and each section's powerful figures were mature generals who did not need to report everything to their lord. During Lord Shepherd's rest period, he had also blocked most notification alerts. However, he hadn't silenced a few channels of communication. General Deadbone's channel was naturally one of them. Deadbone seldom sent messages, and would never do so without a reason, indicating a major event. Goblin. Legendary. He's moving southward. He harbors malicious designs against Tianyuan territory. With a clear understanding of General Deadbone's paranoia, strike that, cough cough, steady spirit, Mu Yuan translated the precise information from Deadbone's words by himself. A legendary goblin from the goblin race, inching southward, is that it? He pondered. As a lord, he could afford to be steady, but could not afford paranoia, for he must choose the most appropriate strategy. And now, the Goblin Legendary is moving south. The Goblin Legendary is probing something. The Goblin Legendary has a certain chance of discovering our Tianyuan territory, even in the vast wilderness, and though strictly speaking the probability isn't high, but if they were discovered and the location of the territory was exposed, their situation would become extremely perilous. Should they fight? Face a legendary realm head-on? The legendary realm commands vast domains, borrowing the powers of heaven and earth, a strength beyond the reach of common warriors. Though Mu Yuan had never personally fought against a legendary, he had felt their awe-inspiring presence from afar. Even separated by tens of kilometers or more, the godlike pressure emanating from a legendary being still seemed to constrict their throats, making it difficult to breathe. And the Goblin Prince, this particular legendary, even had the grand accomplishment of coordinating an ambush on a XIMO legendary. Confronting a legendary, actively declaring war on a well-established legendary, was not an easy decision to make. Everyone harbors hope against the odds. The Goblin Legendary might not discover Tianyuan territory. But I cannot gamble, we can't afford the price of losing a bet. No matter how small the probability, we can't gamble. By now, 10 seconds had passed since Deadbone had sent the message. He no longer had time to hesitate. And face defeat. Decisive action was their only chance. The Goblin Legendary, he brings a path leading to death. For the safety of the territory, for his officers and countless territory citizens, Mu Yuan had no choice but to invite this Goblin Legendary to his demise. The time to fight had come. With this realization, he no longer wavered, no longer considering other possibilities. His mind focused on only one possibility: how to snipe and assassinate this terrifying legendary, relying on the meager and frail power at his disposal. Tianyuan territory, enter the highest alert state immediately, adjust the status of the division-level powerhouses, and be ready to strike at any moment. A deep alarm sound echoed over the core area of the territory and across the left and right giant military camps. The domain interferers began to buzz and operate at high speed. Orders were relayed in all directions. A host of generals were alarmed. Ilo hurried down from the staff of Divine Right, fully aware of the dread that came with the legendary realm. The legendary realm wielded power not meant for mortals. In the Eagle Kingdom she once belonged to, not even an entire nation could produce a single legendary being. The mere possibility of a legendary entity approaching was enough to turn a country like Eagle into utter chaos. Our territory won't be in trouble, right? Daisy pursed her lips. She too was once from the Eagle Kingdom, and in her memory, the legendary realm was higher than the heavens. Yet their Tianyuan was merely a small town. Nothing will go wrong, Ilo asserted confidently. In the northern city, the defensive core barracks. El Yulu, holding a large spear, gazed at the distant azure sky, which seemed to grow darker, with clouds slowly gathering. The somber sky hung over them like a massive rock pressing on their hearts. Countless elites silently stood, but their silence was filled with resolve. I will hold Tianyuan territory's defenses, Liu Lu declared. Yuta, standing beside him, was not silent. The flames of battle burned in his eyes as he slowly unwrapped the bandages around his arms. There are 8 chains within a human body constraining the flesh, and I could previously sever only 6 of them, but now, I can shatter all 8 locks. Around him, chains seemed to materialize and then burst apart as a towering aura erupted around him. He fixed his gaze on the horizon of the sky. When all the chains are shattered, whether my fist can withstand a legendary realm, I'd like to find out. He was eager to test his strength. Duo Lai was rushing back from the mines. The epic band formed by Bone 2, Bone 3, Bone 4 and the other 14 skeleton lords had already set out. Mu Yuan presided over the Staff of Divine Right, preparing for ultra-long-range support. The Level 4 Staff of Divine Right had 100 slots, of which the technique Night Hidden Starry Sky occupied 20. After that technique was used, the next Night Hidden Starry Sky would begin manufacturing. He had 80 technique slots at his disposal. Among them, 3 Roaring Thunder Flame Dragons, 10, and 2000 Prism Large Reflection, 10, were inscribed. Subsequently, Mu Yuan inscribed a dozen more powerful techniques, including offensive, defensive, and support types. Besides the Staff of Divine Right, I also have the God General Talisman Stone, an Overlimit Duo Lai, a Seed-Bursting Yuta, the Skeleton Lord Group, the Treant Lord Group, A&D. Mu Yuan listed the trump cards in his hand, his gaze passing through the window glass, looking out at the sea of clouds beyond. The wind rose up. In a certain part of the wilderness, the Goblin Prince suddenly halted his steps. He still hadn't found the treasured land he was satisfied with, but he had discovered something that intrigued him. The scent of living beings. And it's someone from Taishan. The former Goblin Kingdom was located near the Dark Forest, next to the Taishan Alliance. As for this human force, he could say that few monsters understood Taishan better than he did. The Taishan Alliance has grown too fast. In the past, my Goblin Kingdom had once suppressed Taishan momentarily, but now it's far outmatched. For the sake of revenge, he had deeply researched the Taishan Alliance. He understood the culture of Taishan, recognized the styles of their equipment, and was familiar with the common military types of Taishan. He even had some understanding of the Taishan Alliance's covered markings. This place must be very far from the Taishan Alliance, there's not the slightest trace of Taishan here, but if I, the prince, can be unwittingly transported to this place through space, it's also possible for someone from the Taishan Alliance. Perhaps, an entire Taishan territory got moved to this region. I can take my time searching for the treasured land, but people from Taishan must die. If this place were near the Taishan Alliance, he might have hesitated, but he was deep in the wilderness here. What did he, the Goblin Prince, have to fear? Let's retrieve a little interest from the body of this fortunate Taishan creature first. He. The Goblin Prince changed direction and walked on air, leaving. Over 100 kilometers away, Deadbone secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he sensed that the trap he had left behind finally worked. He also remained on high alert. The Goblin Prince truly lives up to being at the legendary realm, indeed very cautious. The first 3 sets of bait didn't lure him, and it was only this 4th set of arrangements that caught this legend. So difficult to deal with, too difficult indeed. However, due to the rush earlier, the arrangement of this 4th set of bait was actually a bit crude. Deadbone wasn't pleased as there was no time and no opportunity to modify it. Unexpectedly, it was this set of bait that hooked the Goblin legend. Deadbone pondered this and began to apply various buff statuses to himself one after the other. Bone Harden, Strength Amplification, Spirit Boost, Armor Protection, Death Barrier, Shadow Immersion, Energy Circuit, in total, 36 kinds. Most were basic or advanced skills he had self-learned, self-researched, and self-awakened, while a small part came from one-time use scrolls of magic. After completing these, General Deadbone then targeted a certain direction and hurried off. He rushed. The Goblin Prince pursued. You can't escape, even if you had wings. The Goblin Prince laughed shrilly. His figure swept through the air like a large bird, racing swiftly, his breath now spreading largely unrestrained, startling the wilds into dead silence, the roars of monsters abruptly ceasing. His domain also spread out, as if radar waves scanning the surroundings in circles. It didn't take long before he made a discovery. Found you. In the distance, a black armored figure, with an energy signature far exceeding others, ran swiftly. On the parts not covered by the black armor, some silver-white bones were exposed. Clearly, this leading realm figure was not human. But the Goblin Prince knew well that the Miracle Lord could recruit various types of troops, and a fair number of the strong within the Tai-Xian alliance were not of the human race. Besides, this armor, with its distinct Tai-Xian style, is obviously Tai-Xian made. This was one of the lieutenants of some Miracle Lord. Does that mean the Lord is also nearby? The Goblin Prince increased the suppressive force of his domain. An invisible might rolled forth like a tidal wave, spreading out before him. The black-armored strongman ceased his escape. Under the influence of the domain, any mundane realm strongman is but an ant in a web, unable to break free, unable to escape. Suddenly, gloomy, cold, and shrouded in chilling winds, the domain centered around the black-armored undead spread out mightily, pushing open the invisible field that enveloped it. It was as if there were two circles. The inner circle was the gloomy and cold realm of the dead, with exposed white bones, entwining black mist, and undead that sought resurrection. The outer circle was unseen, but the air within it was already distorted by the massive domain's tremors. The scale of the outer circle was 10 or even 20 times larger than the inner circle. The Goblin Prince was surprised for a moment, then began to cackle even more gleefully and contentedly. What could be more delightful than crushing a Tai-Xian strongman who was eligible for ascension to the legendary realm? He stood against the azure sky. Behind him, the true image of the domain finally revealed itself. There were rolling mountains and towering peaks. The Goblin Prince was standing on the summit of a mountain, looking down upon all beings of the dusty world. Once his mountainous domain genuinely exerted its force, General Deadbone's realm of the undead emitted a strained buzzing, as if it might burst at any moment. Only a domain can fight a domain. And the battle between domains is simple and brutal. Bigger is stronger. The greatest radius of the realm of the dead was merely 500 meters. This range was not actually small and represented the extreme limit of the domain that beings below the legendary realm could control. The extreme limit of the rules. However, the radius of the Goblin Prince's mountainous domain exceeded 4,000 meters. The disparity in volume and mass between the two domains was so vast it was incalculable. Even if the realm of the dead's ranking was slightly higher, it was nowhere near making up for such a significant difference in scale. Within just 2 or 3 seconds, the realm of the dead shrank to a mere 100 meters in diameter and seemed likely to shatter at any moment. Countless monsters, flora, and stones had already cracked and shattered under the overwhelming pressure of the mountainous domain, with juices and blood flowing widely. Indeed, the power of the legendary realm is too terrifying. General Deadbone sighed and had no choice but to retract his domain. In an instant, the mountainous domain enveloped everything. It was as if countless mountains were bearing down upon him, and General Deadbone's entire body visibly sank, causing the ground beneath to crack with a snapping sound. The Goblin Prince slowly extended a hand. Around him, countless invisible and formless elemental particles converged, forming visibly bright yellow specks that swiftly interwove into a palm that could obscure the sun. The power of heaven and earth, Kangtian Palm. For those in the legendary realm, this was merely a relatively serious blow, yet it was already an unreachable height for those below the legendary realm, even the fourth order peak. In the legendary realm, one is considered a god. Beneath the gods, all are ants. The terrifying palm moved slowly forward, compressing all the air around it. Its speed seemed slow, but it firmly locked onto the chi of the distant black-armored undead. With the coordination of the domain, the mighty black-armored general had no possibility of evasion. There was only desperate struggle in the face of despair. In General Deadbone's eyes, the soul flame was calm and deeply blue. He grasped the black greatsword wailing death and let out a slow sigh. Hum! The sword's deathly black mist entwined like a dragon. Behind him, the blurry holy mountain of white bones faintly emerged. General Deadbone drew slightly on the energy of the undead from the holy mountain, mixing it with his own at a ratio of 1:99, and slashed out an icy and supreme strike that seemed slow but was incredibly fast. River of Netherworld. An endless stream of energy transformed into a vast, grey-black river, which surged toward the sky, where countless flowers of the other shore bloomed along the banks of the Stygian River. The colors black and yellow clashed mid-air. The river water exploded, and black raindrops cascaded down. Trees withered, rotted, and turned to dust, the earth grayed and cracked with ghastly white fissures. Inch by inch, the earthy yellow palm turned grey-black, with clumps of soil falling away. Crashing to the ground like collapsing boulders, they created deep pits with thunderous roars. After a while, the earthy yellow palm completely disintegrated, and the vast and overpowering river of Netherworld was also shattered, dissipating into the heavens and earth. In this strike, neither side gained an advantage. General Deadbone collected the data. It seems that this was merely a casual blow from the Goblin Prince. Truly, the might of a legend is as terrifying as expected. Fortunately, this river of Netherworld was also just a probing attack, an insubstantial draw of power, not a strong one at all. Chapter 304, Skeleton Town Domain, Appearance of the Giant Human of Death Remains. The rumbling between heaven and earth gradually dissipated, leaving only a devastated land so ravaged, its original topography unrecognizable. The Goblin Prince narrowed his eyes. He was slightly surprised. Just slightly, of course. With the strike just now, he hadn't actually intended to kill the armored warrior. His goal was to capture the general alive, using him as a clue to locate the miracle lord who might exist in this territory. Thinking this, the Goblin Prince spread his palm again, stirring the power of heaven and earth in the blink of an eye to form a colossal hand capable of grasping an entire hill. He slapped forward. The yellow giant hand obscured the sky like a slowly falling mountain. In the distance, the armored warrior seemed to be exerting all his might to slash out another roaring Stygian river, even more vast and spectacular than before. In an instant, thunder roared across the sky and earth, and storms ravaged all around. The Goblin Prince raised his right hand high, a giant outline appearing in his palm as he gathered the power of heaven and earth to fiercely pound down 3 times. The distant armored warrior also slashed out 3 rivers of Netherworld in succession. This time, the Goblin Prince was truly a bit startled. To withstand a blow from the power of heaven and earth in the legendary realm with a mortal body was something only a rare few amongst those at the 4th Order peak could do. Such strong men, the prince had indeed encountered a few in his life. Each one possessed super moves that outsiders could neither learn nor imitate. But such super moves typically exhausted the energies of the peak strong men, draining their power and overburdening their bodies. For them, to use it once was to risk their lives, to use it 3 or 4 times was unthinkable. The Goblin Prince had never seen a peak strongman with such ability, but he had heard a few tales. For instance, in the Taishan Alliance, there stood a peerless genius at the very top of the Dragon Gate ranking. And this armored warrior before him was just that. This prince is willing to acknowledge you as the strongest beneath the legendary realm, but how many more times can you lash out with an attack like the vast river of Netherworld when you're giving it your all? Whereas the attacks I deliver with the power of heaven and earth consume next to nothing. If it wasn't for harnessing the power of heaven and earth, with 99% of the expense paid by the elemental particles of heaven and earth, even the Goblin Prince would suffer a significant drain from such a strike. If even he, being from the legendary realm, would be thus affected, then what of a mere 4-order peak warrior from the ordinary realm? Usually, just 1 river of Netherworld could exhaust the entire energy of a 4-order peak combatant. Unparalleled warriors were always leaps and bounds beyond common fighters. But no matter how extensive your energy reserves, how far could they possibly go? Even if you possess 4 times, 6 times, 10 times the energy of other peak strong men, what of it? The energy reserves of the Deadbone were indeed meager. Even though it was now an epic 3 stars being, compared to a standard 4-order peak being, it could only have dozens of times more energy at best. Dozens of times the energy reserves, in a battle of this scale, amounted to little more than a drop in the bucket. No matter if it slashed out dozens of rivers of Netherworld, it would be meaningless. The Deadbone was probing, pondering. After releasing the 4th river of Netherworld, it reigned in its presence and, using the energy storm as cover, fled into the distance. However, such flight proved futile. The Goblin Prince had already locked onto it. The power of his domain was like chains shackling it. With the domain advantage, the Goblin Prince could not only prevent his enemies from escaping, but also retreat with ease if he ever found himself at a disadvantage. For the Deadbone, there were only 2 possible outcomes in this battle. Victory for itself. The death of the Goblin Prince. The Goblin Prince had to die. It fought while retreating, having launched the 8th river of Netherworld. The Goblin Prince grew increasingly astonished, his eyes darkening with the intent to kill. This child must not be spared. Once the armored warrior steps into the legendary realm, he will immediately become a strongman among legends. Give him a little more time to cultivate, and perhaps in a few years, he would become even stronger than Sword Saint Tianhe, maybe even Moon Sword immortal. But no matter how high his potential, no matter how extraordinary, the armored warrior would fall here. At this thought, the Goblin Prince's homesickness dissipated somewhat, and he let out a jagged laugh. Suddenly, he paused slightly, his domain detecting over a dozen figures rushing over from afar. And these figures had an aura quite similar to that of the armored warrior. This was why Deadbone had delayed, retreating while fighting. It was waiting for the reunion with the skeleton horde. Goblin Prince, what were you waiting for? Deadbone couldn't be sure, and thus dared not be careless. What the Goblin Prince was waiting for, could it also be a trump card? The Goblin Prince. He gazed into the distance, identifying each incoming undead as a strongman. This was likely a miracle territory that predominantly consisted of undead troop types. The prince couldn't determine which troop type these undead were, but that didn't matter. Numbers have no meaning in the face of the grand legendary realm. He made his move. This time, he abandoned the cat and mouse stance and held nothing back. The power of his domain unfolded fully, sky and earth trembled as majestic mountains rose from the ground, forming a throne to elevate him. In this mode, the Goblin Prince's power was greatly amplified, and his control over the power of heaven and earth expanded several times over. Whoosh, whoosh. Countless earth elemental particles gathered from all directions, coalescing in his palm. From a distance, the entire sky turned a bright yellow, as if covered by a veil. Beneath the bright yellow sky, atop a range of peaks, countless elemental particles coalesced into one spear after another of brownish-yellow lances, hovering around the Goblin Prince. However, these spears were so massive they resembled horizontally laid buildings, bringing an indescribable sense of oppression. What has happened? Tens of kilometers away, wisdom monsters gaped in astonishment before fleeing to the distance as if their lives depended on it. Even further away, on a certain mountain peak, a winged feet Herman strongman was hiding and sneaking peeks at the scene, unable to help but gape. A legend has emerged. A being of the legendary realm has taken serious action. He was a feather court guard personally trained by the Queen, a secret strongman from her side. To many young feathermen, their feet Herman nation had been closed off for many years, but what they didn't know was that the Queen had still left a few eyes and ears to collect information from the outside world. This feet Herman strongman was one of them. He also knew that a foreign visitor had recently arrived in the feet Herman nation. Could it be that this vitality force has been discovered by a supreme being of legendary realm? No, that won't do, I must report to Her Majesty immediately. As for stepping forward to investigate personally, he decidedly would not dare. This wasn't a question of bravery but rather, going would mean death in vain. No one could spy under the watchful eye of a being from the legendary realm. On the northwestern side of the battlefield, a wisdom monster from the number 1 Jackal Man tribe gazed at the bright yellow expanse of sky. It was unaware of the existence of the Goblin Prince and possessed limited intelligence. But at least it knew that upon seeing such a scene, what it needed to do was, go home, report. When in doubt, leave the decision to the boss. Lads, follow me. The patrol monster captain waved its claw, and the other unintelligent beasts followed, shaking their heads and waggling. The next moment. Ding 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 ding. Amidst the cacophony of tree shadows, the patrol captain seemed to see multiple after shadows before its very eyes. It fell to the ground, its body no longer breathing. Clean up the scene, and then we must head to the next place. At the same time, Yuan, holding techniques in his hand, looked out over the entire battlefield with the eye of divine right. The personnel have taken their positions. The battlefield has also been set up, we can begin the real fight now. On the battlefield, the Goblin Prince continued to amass power, accumulating building-sized lances. He held up one hand as if supporting something while slowly closed the other into a clenched fist. From all directions, the towering mountains rumbled as they moved towards the center. Domain mountains killing. The power of Seal from his domain was more than 10 times stronger than its original might. This was the true old brand legendary domain. Under the power of domain sealing, weaker skeleton lords became rigid, with their internal energies sluggishly moving like slow-crawling turtles, almost losing 80 to 90% of their combat power. They, too, were beings with 4-order combat power. However, 4-order creatures seemed to lack even the qualifications to act in front of a true legendary realm being. Bone 2 with its bones creaking refused to suffer this indignity. It wished it could directly charge forward, but it found itself hardly capable to do so, and besides, it couldn't fly. It could only look towards its invincible boss. Through the psychic network, in the span of their thoughts, they had already exchanged tactics. Within the towering mountains, all of a sudden, a summit piled with white bones stood out conspicuously. The Bone Mountain, higher and more real than the rest of the peaks, suddenly inserted itself among what seemed like illusory landscapes. Simultaneously, a force similar to that of the domain, affecting the surrounding space and sealing the heavens and earth, rolled out from the white bone sacred mountain as its center. The originally invisible but solely interferable by another domain mountains wavered suddenly, with the sound of loose stones tumbling down. What is this thing? The Goblin Prince had just widened his eyes when, in the distant azure sky, plains of white bones began to appear. 1, 2, 3, 14. The moment the 14 death remains territories appeared, they instantly resonated together. Unlike the formations they practiced before, they used the 1-3-11 formation this time. With the Wraith Sacred Mountain as the center, 3 death remains territories were arranged in a protective triangle, while the remaining 11 territories of death remains extended further out. This formation, although slightly different from what Bone 2, Bone 3 and Bone 4 practiced regularly, now allowed the territories to merge and resonate faster, more smoothly and more stably than ever before. In just a blink. When the Goblin Prince still didn't understand what had happened, the Goblin Prince faintly felt something wrong and indeed made his move. The Goblin Prince found he couldn't affect the resonating and merging territories. He brazenly made his move. The dozens of massive brownish-yellow spears, each comparable to 100-meter building on either side of the Goblin Prince, tore through heaven and earth and plunged mercilessly toward the ground. Boom! Boom 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 boom! The earth shook violently, cracking thousands of meters of trenches. Distant mountains were pierced and subsequently shattered, rising up to the sky in billowing dust. Some building-sized lances even penetrated distant rivers, cutting off entire waterways, their invisible power spreading and instantly drying up the riverbed. At the center, storms, dust, and tidal waves of energy already enveloped everything. Suddenly, they were torn apart by an unfathomable great force. The wind stopped. The dust returned to the earth. The tidal waves of energy seemed to be absorbed by something, seeping into the land covered in pale bones. What was left for the Goblin Prince to see was only mountains, wilderness, bone forest, and atop the sacred mountain, a throne constructed from countless white bones. Black armor and a black cloak fluttered in the wind. Countless undead emerged from the ground and from the grey-black world beyond, howling up to the sky, offering their hearts for the ascent of their king. Over the pale land and atop the white bone sacred mountain, wisps of black fog drifted. The fog was much thinner than before, with some earth and yellow debris sticking to it. It was this black fog that blocked the building javelins from the goblin legend. Even so, deep ravines had formed within the Wraith Sacred Mountain. Such damage was the most it had ever sustained since its birth. The most. In my name. Within the domain, the power of countless undead swarmed over. The well of death behind began to surge forth. The sword of death bone was thrust upside down into the summit of the sacred mountain. Resonating and merging together, the land of the Wraith Sacred Mountain appeared in the world, several times larger than its normal state. Crack! Within the domain of the mountains, a burdened hum echoed. The domain was not affected by any physical matter, but at that moment, the mountainous domain seemed to bear the weight of a world. It could not handle the weight of the world, nor withstand the world's oppression. It. Crack crack crack! The mountain ranges cracked open, the earth cracked open, the soil and rocks cracked open, and the foundations of the domain were fracturing as well. Only a domain can contend with a domain. This was common knowledge. There were a few exceptions to this common sense. For example, the special abilities of an epic life. The Goblin Prince understood this. He was certain that the black-armored general was an epic life, and not a common epic at that, but... He glanced around. There were 14 figures standing beside and behind the black-armored general, each with their own domain overhead, emanating a vast and imposing aura. All of them epics. Was this reasonable? But reality was in front of him, and the Goblin Prince's mind was nearly crashing, as a slight sense of retreat hesitantly sprouted within him. It was not about being defeated, it was just too strange. But such thoughts lasted only a moment, as if he were to tactically retreat now, in the future, he would never be able to hold his head high again in the Jackal Man legend. As the mountainous domain shattered, the shackles binding the Deathbone warriors ceased to exist. Bone 2 felt an unexpected lightness, with seemingly endless energy. On looking again, the boss had vanished without a trace. The boss had gone into action. At that moment, the undead seemed to be possessed by Bone 2's spirit, showing a bravery like none other in this era, as it charged against the current towards the Goblin Prince. It was very calm at that moment. Even if the Goblin Prince's domain was neutralized, it still had no advantage. If it was a long-range bombardment or an energy drain, it would most likely still be defeated. Most importantly, even if it won with such tactics, it could never capture the Goblin Prince. Wraith Sacred Mountain could not truly suppress a legend. The opponent still held the advantage of coming and going freely. If one wished to assassinate this legend, there was only one way. To cast aside the flashy energy moves and the superficially stable long-range bombardments, and engage in the most dangerous close combat. The undead spread its wings and soared into the sky. The Goblin Prince opened his eyes wide, bearing a smile. Close combat? What gave you the delusion that you could defeat a legend in hand-to-hand fighting? With the domain damaged, the prince was furious. With a low roar, a brown-yellow torrent wrapped around him, and he grew taller and taller, wrapped in the earth and yellow energy, like a mountainous giant. In his hands, the chain hammer he swung expanded several times, dozens of times, hundreds of times in size. Like a golden yellow meteor. The meteor paused mid-air, as a gigantic white bone hand grasped it. From behind the white bony palm, a giant burning with a faint cold flame, its body cast from white bone, tore through the torrent and flew out. In front of the mountain-like Goblin Prince, it cast an even larger shadow. Chapter 305, Narrow Victory. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. The Goblin Prince stood upon the remnant apex of the mountain within his own domain, expanding into a giant. In front of him, amidst the turbulent torrent, an even more colossal creature suddenly appeared. It was a skeletal giant. Its body was constructed from countless thick bones interwoven together, and around this skeletal body, a faint blue cold flame enveloped it. Behind the giant, a pair of tattered but equally huge bone wings stretched out. The giant looked down, looming over the mountain summit. In one hand, it tightly grasped a hammer as large as a meteor, and in the other, it wielded a huge sword with agility that belied its massive form. It swung the sword down. This is unreasonable. The chain hammer clanged, but it failed to smash the giant bone hand built of white bones. The Goblin Prince could only pull back the chain hammer by force to block the sword. But at the same time, the skeletal giant had already closed in, with bone swords protruding from its elbow, forehead, chest, knee joints, from every part. The skeletal giant was as agile as its true form. After all, if the skeleton giant beast was such an inconvenient entity, there would be no sense in developing this skill. It had upgraded the skeleton giant beast to a skeletal giant a long time ago and was already adept at it. It's okay not to use one's trump card, but one must never be without it. And now, it was indeed being deployed. The skeletal giant maneuvered the fog of bones, and after just a dozen or so exchanges, it broke through the Goblin Prince's defenses. With the enhancement of the Wither King bone, these external armors, even if they were not truly King's bone, were extremely sharp. Bone spikes, bone swords, bone spears effortlessly pierced and tore through the layers of the goblin's legendary rocky armor. Armor fragments fell in rustling sounds. The mountainous mech armor, that the Goblin Prince had shaped, quickly diminished as well. Boom! The rocky giant burst apart, rings of earthy yellow halos spread, contaminating the skeletal giant in front of it, causing the movements of the skeletal giant to gradually slow down. The Goblin Prince flew out from the dust, and a swing of his chain hammer caused the skull of the giant to crack open. Dead bone surged out from the giant's skull, its pupils blazing with bright blue soul flames. This was the moment for close combat, a fight to the death. Legendaries rarely do this, after all, even legendary realm beings can die if their heads are chopped off or their hearts smashed. They usually opt for a more secure way of fighting, but that doesn't mean they can't fight at close quarters. The Goblin Prince, back in the day, had also emerged from a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. He did not retreat an inch. He displayed the peak of his skills, surpassing even that peak. He is, after all, a legendary realm existence. He had even fought in hand-to-hand combat with other legendaries of the same tier. With a single palm strike, the Goblin Prince easily tore apart the armor of the black-armored warrior before him. The rare-level treasure armor before the Goblin Prince was scarcely thicker than a sheet of cardboard. He regained the confidence that came with being a legendary realm being. Dang! The hand glowing with a yellow halo stamped on the white skeletal structure, exquisitely clear as white jade, as if striking the sturdiest primeval rock. The earthy yellow stream of energy shattered the entire black armor and even penetrated through the armor and bone structure, creating a muddy yellow energy river behind the skeleton strongman. However, the skeletal strongman, who had taken the hit head-on, had its clear white bones merely slightly cracked. Cracks as fine as a hairline appeared. And within the blink of an eye, these small cracks had all healed, leaving the entire set of white jade bones as smooth as new. As if the damage just now was nothing but an illusion. As if the shattering of the treasure armor was merely the release of some seal. As if. This is too unreasonable. Dead Bone, having endured this strike, finally let out a sigh of relief. Too dangerous. Too dangerous. It had taken a super huge risk, akin to facing death, to endure this blow from the Goblin Prince, just so that. Click. Dead Bone, having brushed past the Goblin Prince, took advantage of the gap when he withstood the blow and stabbed the legendary being with a light bone finger. Before this bone finger thrust, Dead Bone had executed several feint attacks. Bone Whip, Bone Spike danced in the air. Wailing death slashed down. And as the bone finger was thrust, the blue soul flames in Dead Bone's pupils blazed brightly, and a strand of golden light burst forth from the depths of its sea of consciousness. It was as if golden threads appeared out of thin air, entangling the Goblin Prince's limbs and soul consciousness. King's Might. Materialized entanglement. And with it, the withering quality of the Wither King bone, which meant imminent death upon contact, burst forth instantly. The Goblin Prince instinctively sensed danger, and by the time he realized something was amiss, he no longer had the will to resist. By the time he came to his senses, the bone finger had already pierced through the shining armor on his body, sinking 3 inches in, piercing his skin and penetrating his muscles. The stab was shallow. At first glance, it seemed like a minor scratch, but there was a chill seeping into the marrow, spreading from the wound deep into his soul. This was a dagger from the deepest abyss. The Goblin Prince's flesh instantly decayed, as if he had been a corpse left to wither for countless years, and this decay spread rapidly throughout his body. Spurt! He severed his entire shoulder along with his right arm. Gushing blood and fragments of flesh flew out, mixed with an unpleasant stench of decay. Even though he acted decisively, the withering power of decay still crept bit by bit into his body from the severed stump. The Goblin Prince's face turned ashen, the fear of death crept over him, and his body turned cold. No longer caring for any legendary dignity, he harnessed the power of heaven and earth and sped away toward the direction of the Jackal Man tribe. Simultaneously, he let out a long howl. The howling shook the heavens and the earth, stirring the monsters in the surrounding area. Visible to the naked eye, monsters emerged from the forests and rushed forward like mad, intending to burst through the Death Remains territory enveloping this world. Indeed, Death Remains territory could not confine a legend. This skill was never meant to trap and lock, but its powerful suppressing force rocked the surrounding space, forcing scrolls such as those for spatial transfer to need a longer activation time in this kind of environment. The Goblin Prince had just torn open a scroll, its spatial lines trembling, becoming extremely unstable, and with the slightest inattention, it was directly interrupted. The powerful force of suppression also affected the Goblin Prince, slowing down the legendary figure for a few crucial moments. And in those few moments, General Deadbone had clung to him like a malignant tumor, catching up in close pursuit. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Bone spikes flew, and heavy swords fell. The Goblin Prince ran 200 meters, and the mountain peak that rose from the ground behind him was severed. The Goblin Prince ran 600 meters, and his chain hammer was washed away by the surging rivers of Netherworld. No sooner had the Goblin Prince ran a kilometer than bone spikes and bone swords tore through his armor. The Goblin Prince, already at a disadvantage in physical combat, was grievously wounded, his fate was all but sealed. Pucci! A wound slashed across his cheek, the power of desolation poured into his sea of consciousness, extinguishing the golden radiance within. The light of will flared and flickered. After a dozen seconds, it still could not hold on and dimmed. The Goblin Prince staggered to his knees, his life's experiences flashing before his eyes. He was the king of goblins, he still bore the heavy duty of restoring glory, he hadn't yet taken his revenge on the Taishan alliance, Suddenly, he realized this seemed like an ambush. An ambush specifically for him. From the moment he discovered the clues, to the tracking, the probing, the fighting, it all seemed to be part of the plan of the black-armored general before him. This undead, whose subordinate was it? But he couldn't understand why he had been targeted for such a deliberate ambush. Why go to such lengths to deal with him? He stared with eyes full of unwillingness, his body gradually withered, his green skin turned to ash, flaking off. He had already lost the breath of life. Meanwhile, the horde of monsters summoned by the legendary goblin's howl were still on their way. Following the downfall of the Goblin Prince, the majority of the monsters dispersed, leaving only a few stubborn ones still making their way here. General Deadbone looked at the Goblin Prince kneeling on the ground, his body now as dry as kindling, his exposed bones visible. It still did not approach. It stood in place, waiting for a dozen seconds. Then stretched out its hand to shoot out bone spikes, piercing the Goblin Prince with a puchy, puchy. And then it waited another dozen seconds. Consequently, it sliced several beams of sword light. After testing several times, General Deadbone finally confirmed that the Goblin Prince was thoroughly dead, a death that brought peace of mind. After all, he was a legend, we were confronting a legend head-on for the first time, caution was essential no matter what. Fortunately, with all our might, we have finally won a narrow victory over this great foe. The entire process was indeed too perilous. From a distance, Bone 2 finally arrived at the battlefield. It had been chasing the whole time, wanting to join the fight, but it seemed that by the time it caught up, the battle had already ended. Was this a narrow victory? It looked at the goblin legend who had died an uneasy death and then at its big brother. Ah yes, yes, yes. If you say so, big brother. Far away in the Tianyuan territory, Mu Yuan also let out a sigh of relief. This battle was indeed, probably, rather difficult. The strength of the goblin legend was as anticipated. If it weren't for Deadbone feigning weakness and taking a great risk to create the opportunity for close quarters combat, it would be quite challenging to truly kill a legend. Of course, Mu Yuan was 1000% skeptical of Deadbone's all-out effort and perilous struggle. The only time Deadbone could be said to have exerted all its effort was during the ignition of the Light of Will in the Tower of Challenge. Great Lord Shepherd had also made some contingency plans. In the distance, on the obligatory path to the werewolf tribe, a duo Lai and a Nuda were squatting, they were snipers. With full burst of effort, stalling a legendary creature for a moment was generally not an issue. Mu Yuan also had a 9-headed roaring thunder flame dragon at hand, ready to bring down the might of a thunderbolt from the heavens at any moment. However, large-scale magic. Although the strength of the large-scale magic, merged to the limit and further enhanced by epic architecture, was undeniably strong, it would inevitably cause a great disturbance. Without absolute necessity, he would not resort to this technique. The goblin legend has fallen, but the end has not truly come. There's no time to marvel at the duel with a legendary creature. The one who now entered the scene was the incarnation of Lord Shepherd. He summoned a group of tree people sweepers, rooted in the earth, and quickly changed the entire fragmented landscape. In the blink of an eye, this barren area, full of potholes, burgeoned with fresh vegetation. Suffice it to say, this could hardly restore the vast ruined area back to its original state. Mu Yuan had no such intention either, as he was not an environmentalist. Nor were the treemen. They only protected the environment within their own territory, outside of their territory. The Earth's force of this area is surprisingly strong. It might be the remnants of the legendary realm's power, it's said to be a legend wielding the Earth series power. Earth series? Earth gives birth to wood, this is right up our alley. Then what are we waiting for? Hurry up and draw it out. Draw it out. The treemen whispered amongst themselves, and then they rooted into the earth, forcefully extracting the Earth's force from the land tainted with the blood of legends and enriched with the energy of the Earth series. They used about 1% of the Earth's force to nurture and cultivate the newly sprouted plants. This equated to giving back to the land. Under the treemen's intense extraction, despite the land still wearing the marks of a great battle, energy traces had been disrupted, and the pervasive undead air of death was largely cleared away. Experienced individuals could still discern that a legend had fallen here, but attempting to analyze the entire battle or using it to track the movements of the powerful entities involved had become exceedingly difficult. The treemen were just the first mode of interference. After that, Mu Yuan sent General Duo Lai to disturb the space, allowing Ilo to cover their tracks. He took several measures and, feeling it was sufficient, officially finished the task. Let's get out of here. Duo Lai took with him the remains of the goblin legend, along with a considerable amount of soil, and the group quickly departed. Half a day later, the area remained silent, with some not-so-tall grasses and plants sparsely growing there. No monsters dared to approach, only the rustling of leaves by the wind could occasionally be heard. The silence was disconcertingly profound. A feet Herman carefully pushed through the distant underbrush, tiptoeing towards this place. Looking at the scarred, empty land without any remnants of buildings or corpses, he couldn't help swallowing his spit. This was definitely a battle of legends. And no corpses left behind means the human forces withstood the assault of the legendary monster. Later that day, the Feet Herman Queen pondered. She was not very surprised. For any force that had survived to this day, it was quite normal to have legends guarding them, or to possess means to resist legends. However, merely thinking that way was far from enough to face the overlord power. This human force seemed too unstable, the legendary creatures had discovered them too soon. Regardless, since humans have withstood the attack of a legend, then we can engage in some simple cooperation with humans. But it's too early for further strategic cooperation, we still need to observe and wait. It wasn't that she was indecisive, but rather, she bore the survival pressure of the Feet Herman nation. If she made one wrong step, they could lose everything. She couldn't afford to lose. To the north of the werewolf tribe, in a certain place among the mountains, a werewolf elder of the legendary realm had just returned here. He scoffed, "Ha, the Goblin Kingdom? That's in the past. Even this so-called Goblin Kingdom is nothing compared to the eternal Tiankai Holy Kingdom. However, this prince is indeed a legend and does have some value. Let him slowly establish a new realm. As long as this realm ultimately embraces the Tiankai eternal life, providing the goblins with some support didn't bother them, the werewolf overlords." At the same time, in Tianyuan territory, a banquet was being held, everyone had a bright future in mind. "Wow, this guy is so rich!" exclaimed Duo Lai. Chapter 306. Secret Realm Reconnection. The gifts from the Goblin Prince were astonishingly substantial. Yuan wasn't too surprised. After all, this was a figure from the legendary realm, the first legendary being their Tianyuan territory had fought and defeated, holding extraordinary significance. Most importantly, the Goblin Prince was a high-ranking member of the Goblin Kingdom, carrying a portion of the kingdom's treasures on his person. Even though most of those treasures were used to curry favors in exchange for specific precious items, they were still substantial for the impoverished Tianyuan territory. 1 storage ring, 2 storage rings, 3 storage rings. Duo Lai counted carefully, pulling out a total of 6. 2 of them were slightly damaged. Perhaps, possibly, probably, inevitably, during the combat, some of the fragile storage equipment had been destroyed, and their contents had scattered into the spatial currents. The mere thought made a certain general feel so pained he couldn't breathe. Lord Shepherd, however, was magnanimous. The primary aim of this ambush had been to eliminate the very unsafe variable that was the Goblin Prince and, at the same time, to truly test the power of the legendary realm. Achieving both main objectives was the greatest gain. The other gains weren't important. Bullshit. Yuan still hoped for more bounty. Duo Lai opened the first storage item, and in an instant, a dazzling light sword, with soul crystals piled up before him like a small mountain. There were also numerous cultivation assistance items displayed there. Notification: you have obtained 4,000 soul crystals. Notification: you have obtained a variety of basic materials times 4,000. For a figure from the legendary realm carrying a share of the kingdom's wealth, 4,000 soul crystals couldn't be considered too many. However, the visual impact of these 4,000 soul crystals piled together was indescribably striking, far surpassing the impact of a few high-order treasures. This batch of soul crystals and basic materials had filled the superior-grade storage ring to the brim. That was the tangible feel of an abundance of soul crystals. Sometimes, even for a strong being carrying great wealth while venturing out was not an easy task. General Duo Lai rubbed his hands eagerly and with anticipation, yet the subsequent blind box openings resulted in rather disappointing treasures. Notification: you have obtained Corrupted Goblin Wraith, common, times 2,000. Notification: you have obtained Corrupted Goblin Wraith, rare, times 500. Notification: you have obtained Corrupted Blood of the Wild Beast, rare, times 500. Notification: you have obtained Corrupted Flesh and Blood Sapling, rare, times 500. Notification: you have obtained Corrupted Seed, Goblin Turret, rare, times 50. It was clear that these were strategic materials the Goblin Prince had hoarded in hopes of a resurgence. And there were as many as 500 rare-level remnant souls. Do not look upon the many great lords who effortlessly assembled complete troop legions numbering in the hundreds and thousands, because it was through years, decades, or even longer periods of accumulation that these great lords could amass hundreds of units of rare troops. The Goblin Prince casually produced several hundred. Although I usually disdain goblins, as long as the quantity is sufficient and they're all free, I'm not very particular. However, Yuan couldn't use the corrupted remnant souls. Forcibly recruiting them might contaminate his own lord's altar, and the recruited troops would be chaotic entities tainted by corruption. Rubbish! He couldn't bear to throw them away, so he had to keep them for now. After all, these were precious remnant souls, and with the wonders of the eternal world, who knows if there might come a day when he could find a tool or a building that allowed for the sacrifice of remnant souls to obtain treasures. Then, he would offer up the delectable goblin wraiths. There are also some untainted treasures, such as rare and excellence-grade equipment. Some of these pieces are complete, some damaged. And there are various pieces of construction material, forging materials, A&D. And the most important item that the Goblin Prince had. Corrupted Lord's Heart, Heart of the Nest. This Lord's Heart has been corrupted and cannot be used, but lords or heroes may use the power of purification to cleanse the Lord's Heart. This process requires the consumption of soul crystals. Lord's Heart, a treasure that bears the core rules of the eternal world. 1. If used by a lord, they can create a subsidiary territory in their chosen location, sharing all the permanent blueprints and special benefits with the main territory. 2. If used by a non-lord, they can advance to become a lord, but must pass the lord trial. The Lord's Heart seemed to be one of the most precious treasures that could be produced in the land of two realms. It also contained rules power, but unlike other fragmented treasures, the Lord's Heart wouldn't dissipate over time. It was the foundation for many miracles. Recruiting miracles, constructing miracles, and advancing to miracles were all built on the foundation of the miracle territory. It seems the Goblin Prince had a way to use this Lord's Heart. Yuan discovered that their greatest gain from this battle was this Lord's Heart along with the vast number of soul crystals and materials. Such spoils were indeed quite substantial. The Lord's Heart was a treasure that could not be bought with wealth or power. On the exchange platform of the Taixuan Covenant, it was consistently marked as out of stock. Whenever one did appear, it was quickly exchanged by powerful lords who had been single for 30 years. The trouble is, Lord Shepherd currently had no use for it. The Lord's Heart could be used to establish a subsidiary territory, but considering his current struggles to merely maintain Tianyuan territory, thinking about creating a subsidiary territory seemed far too ambitious. In any case, the Lord's Heart can be left unused, but it cannot be without. After the inventory of recovered pollutants was complete, Yuan instructed Ilo to find a way to seal them. All that remained was a skeleton that had shed all its flesh, now half decayed. A legendary carcass. The carcass was neither tall nor emitted a terrifying aura. It seemed that all that was displayed here was an ordinary humanoid corpse without any hint of its legendary prowess. Indeed, that was the case. Without Yuan or Dead Bone saying anything, nobody knew that this carcass, in its lifetime, was an incomparably mighty legend. The bones it left behind were too common, riddled with blotches that could be easily broken with a little force from soldiers of profession level. This was the terrifying nature of the power of witherness. Touch it, and you die. However, on the flip side, the fact that the Goblin Prince managed to leave behind even a scrap of remains, rather than being utterly annihilated, showed. This Goblin Prince was indeed mighty powerful. Dead Bone was close to defeat in that battle. Dead Bone sincerely exclaimed. But Dead Bone wasn't being modest. It truly felt that the battle was extremely perilous. If it had failed to feign weakness at the beginning, if it couldn't get close to the Goblin Prince, if the infused power of witherness hadn't been enough, the legendary realm could have possibly escaped. Once they failed to slay this legend, the Tianyuan territory would be in constant danger. That would indeed have been a narrow escape from a major defeat. Even though they won, it had consumed more than 1/3 of its power of witherness. This battle was a narrow victory. So much of the power of witherness has been depleted, I must find a way to replenish it quickly and then think of a method to expand the reserve capacity. Otherwise, holding so little power, it's too insecure. Dead Bone didn't feel any pride or exhilaration from defeating a legend. It tightened the rare level treasure armor it had just donned and vanished in the blink of an eye into the cold wind. Only General Duo Lai was left, gazing at the legendary carcass that did not retain even a hint of essence. After a long pause, it barely showed any regret as it curled its lips. Goblin carcass, not even a dog would want it. Defeating this legend didn't mean Tianyuan territory was safe. It only resolved one imminent threat. Having confronted a legend head-on, Lord Shepherd felt slightly more confident. However, that's still far from enough. The Jackal Man and Snake Man tribes, two great overlord powers, obviously have more than just one legend. Apart from legends, the two overlords likely have all kinds of war weapons. The top-tier ones, although individually weaker than a legend, might play no lesser role in a large-scale war. Yuan didn't know much about overlord power. Monster power is varied and strange, and the Eternal Continent is vast. Even the top lords within the Taishan Alliance couldn't claim to fully understand them. Moreover, at present, he hadn't even discovered where these two overlord powers were located. But looking at it from another angle, it suggests that the two overlords are still quite far from here. The several large tribes surrounding them are merely one of the overlord's minions, not the entirety. Overlord powers rely on these tribes to control territories and swallow up emerging camps and tribes, occupying resource-rich lands, and growing stronger. At the same time, they've only shown their claws. Their true bodies are hidden in the vast fog, eluding everyone's comprehension. Forget about Tianyuan territory, a small fry. Even if one of the top lords from the Taishan pioneer group arrived, they might not be able to discern the true situation. If not strong enough, one might be specifically ambushed by overlord powers and thus fall. If strong enough, the overlord powers might abandon their minions and completely vanish into the fog. For Tianyuan territory, contending head-on and eradicating these two overlords is a long way off. However, once Duo Lai and Dead Bone advance to legendary, they would have some self-preservation power. And at present, it would take about 22 days for General Duo Lai to refine himself and reach the 4-order Great Perfection Extreme Realm. It would take about 6 days for General Duo Lai to evolve. Duo Lai will get a significant boost from evolving, but since its potential limit will also greatly increase afterwards, the evolution might not necessarily shorten the refinement time. But the evolution was still necessary. The higher the tier, the easier the process of breaking through to legendary realm, and the greater the improvement after the breakthrough. As General Duo Last Lord, Yuan naturally hoped it could reach further potential before the official breakthrough. As for the overlord power and various monster tribes, we need to drag it out, strive to buy time as much as possible. As for how exactly to do that, he would wait until he had made 200 contingency plans. Suddenly, in the core area of the territory, one of the 3 secret realm entrances on the Lord's altar, leading to the elf's courtyard, began to ripple slightly. The change wasn't significant, but it was discovered by the soldiers who were on duty outside the city lord's mansion, vigilant and responsible. They quickly reported the discovery. A slight change in the secret realm entrance. Previously, impacted by spatial dislocation and shocks, aside from their own Black Wasteland secret realm, he couldn't connect to the other 2 secret realms where he was merely a visitor. And now, the elf's courtyard, this secret realm, seemed to have recovered with the passage of time and the stabilization of space. This is undoubtedly great news. Now, with the Tianyuan territory isolated, he couldn't spend the large batch of soul crystals he had just acquired and was in need of a spending channel. With the secret realms connected, he could also inquire about the current state of the secret realms. The Elf Courtyard Secret Realm. Today coincided with the bi-monthly trading assembly, where people bustled in and out of the secret realm, creating quite a lively scene. The trading assembly is much livelier now compared to a few months ago. That's to be expected. Now that Langxing has merged into the Eternal World, we've lost a major transit platform and can only connect to these smaller secret realm platforms. It's not just livelier, even getting a hold of a key to the secret region is tough nowadays. My friend has asked me for the 3rd time about when I can get a key to the Elf's Courtyard. Difficult. The batches of keys the Lord of Hanyu City distributed previously all have owners now. Currently, the Lord of Hanyu City certainly still has keys to the secret region, but they are not something you or I can easily obtain. More than hard to get. If we weren't old members of the Elf's Courtyard, even getting a key to the secret realm would cost us a lot now. Speaking of which, if even the Elf's Courtyard is like this, I can hardly imagine how bustling those old, established trading secret realms that have been operating for decades are. A Great Lord sighed. Trading secret realms and transit secret realms like the Elf's Courtyard are few within the entire Taishan Alliance, but there are still a dozen or more that are publicly known. In these trading secret realms, the Elf's Courtyard is considered one of the more quiet ones. For one thing, the secret realm is new. By the time the Lord of Hanyu City got it and started operating, most powerful lords already had their established trading channels and did not want to use hers. As for the ordinary lords without much potential, the Lord of Hanyu City didn't want to give keys to these people. She didn't even want to sell them. There is a limit to the number of territories that a public secret realm can link to. She prefers to take the boutique approach. Therefore, most of the keys to the secret realm that the Lord of Hanyu City gave away were gifted to promising new lords with potential. In the past, these emerging lords weren't very wealthy, and they had Langxing as their main trading platform. Hence, the Elf Courtyard Mystery Territory was relatively quiet. Even during the bi-monthly trading assemblies, the number of participating lords was often low. Until now, with Langxing's integration, the importance of trading secret realms has skyrocketed. Only in such places could one buy special products from other major regions. And today, the number of lords who entered the secret realm exceeded 100. The trading assembly is lively, but most of us basically can't afford to buy anything, we can only watch. From a distance, Zhang Loxing shook his head slightly. Next to him, several fellow lords smiled bitterly. They were the true ones who couldn't afford anything, unlike Zhang Loxing and Lu Miamu, who claimed they couldn't afford but generously splurged on anything that caught their eye. These were rich brothers and sisters. They were wealthier than many of the older generation up-and-comers. Of course, compared to the wealthiest lords present, Zhang Loxing and the rest of the rich second generation still had a long way to go. They were, at best, the rich second generation, while the few powerful lords in front were the rich first generation. Thinking of this, the desire to envy and spite, akin to eating lemons, in the hearts of the fellow lords eased slightly. The next moment, their eyes widened in surprise and kept getting rounder. They had spotted a familiar figure. The Tianyuan giant. Chapter 307, Treasure Auction. Ever since Langxing's integration, Elf Courtyard Mystery Territory has seen bustling activity, with many people here to drink tea and chat even outside of the trading gathering periods. However, Tianyuan Guy has been nowhere to be seen. Some lords had heard rumors that Tianyuan Guy had met with an unexpected event, that during the disaster integration phase, his entire territory had encountered a spatial displacement and was thrown deep into the wilderness. But now, the long-absent Tianyuan Guy appeared. It has barely been half a month since the integration with Langxing, not a long time. Still, the entire world, or at least the entire Taishan alliance, underwent earth-shaking changes. The changes varied, with some good and some bad, and places like the trading secret realm, these high-end gathering venues, became the easiest spots to gather information from all over the world. Every lord would visit the secret realm whenever they had some free time. Thanks to the way the secret realm existed, a lord's visit to the secret realm was as simple as visiting a neighbor's house. Lords ran to the secret realm day in and day out, several times a day. Sometimes, even if they were too busy to get away, they would ask their heroes to go on their behalf. It was no secret that Tianyuan territory was connected to the secret realm, yet after half a month, there was still no sign of Lord Tianyuan, leading some to speculate. Tianyuan giant. Some lords couldn't help but exclaim. In an instant, over half of the lords in the secret realm turned their gaze in that direction, even those who were bidding for treasures couldn't resist but sneak a peek. Tianyuan was a celebrity. The only publicly known combat achievements of Lord Tianyuan were the Lord Trial and Hero Festival, and even the news of Lord Tianyuan representing the Taishan alliance in the Dragon Court conflict only circulated in a few small circles. Nevertheless, just the Hero Festival battle alone was enough to make Tianyuan's name renowned. Tianyuan was said to bear the likeness of Lord of Hanyu City, known as Little Hanyu. Moreover, Lord Tianyuan's movements were always unpredictable, with few lords having the chance to encounter him. Now that they had the chance, they were eager to take a closer look, to see if there was anything that set Lord Tianyuan apart from ordinary people. Upon closer inspection, there was nothing unusual, save for the fact that he was quite handsome, worthy of the name Tianyuan indeed. Mu Yuan was taken aback by the bustling atmosphere as soon as he stepped into Elf's courtyard. When had this secret realm ever been so lively? Even during trading sessions, there would only be a dozen or so lords present. Sometimes, the arrival of Lord of Hanyu City would attract a bunch of star-chasing lords, but today Lord of Hanyu City wasn't there. He found himself like a handsome boy under the watchful eyes of many, which made Mr. Mu, skilled in the dead bone arts, slightly uncomfortable. He quickly figured it out. The other lords didn't look on for long either. Each of them was a great lord with thousands of territory citizens and numerous valiant soldiers under their command. They weren't there to chase stars but out of curiosity and for the spectacle. Some lords approached to make acquaintance and get familiar. Even now, although Tian Yuan was still considered a green-hand lord, it was only a matter of time before he surpassed them given his potential. It was necessary to get to know a future big shot in advance. So thought a few lords. But what they might not have considered was that Tian Yuan, described as relatively green-hand, was a story from several updates ago. After chatting for a bit, Mu Yuan inquired about the general situation of the world from Zhang Loxing and Lu Miamu. The alliance has been preparing for a long time. The integration with Langxing this time went rather smoothly. There were some minor incidents, but hardly any major ones, said Zhang Loxing. Before the disaster, accidents were inevitable. The rescue efforts of Taishan Lianji and Players Association weren't always timely. Sacrifices, falls, and deaths happened now and then. This was the result of the efforts of the official departments and most lords from various areas doing their best to rescue people. Compared to Taishan, although the neighboring Starlight Empire also loudly claimed they would not abandon any citizen, the reality of who actually helped ordinary people were just a few lords and some civil rescue organizations. In face of the disaster, the surviving people of Taishan could only live in simple temporary housing, uprooted from their homes and filled with uncertainty about the future. They couldn't call themselves happy, but by comparing their situation to those in godlike country, they might find some solace. Some territories on the outskirts of the alliance moved out a bit, but none as dramatically as yours, Tian Yuan Giant, to the point of being in a place where communication artifacts can't even make contact, said Zhang Loxing. Tian Yuan Giant, have you figured out the coordinates of your territory yet? Zhang Loxing asked. Mu Yuan shook his head. The area he was in was rather peculiar. The Feet Herman country had lived here for so long without ever encountering any Taishan pioneers passing by. Without a reference point, he couldn't determine his position. For now, I can only guarantee safety and slowly explore outward, hoping to find reliable clues someday, sighed Mu Yuan. While some lords felt that Lord Tian Yuan was in crisis, Zhang Loxing didn't think so. With Tian Yuan Giant's capabilities, how could the depths of the wild pose even the slightest threat to him? Tian Yuan Giant was a super big shot who ranked first in the Dragon Court conflict selections. He was already not on their level, probably stronger than many veteran lords. I always said Tian Yuan Giant certainly has no problems, said Zhang Loxing. Like me, my territory was also forced to move a bit. I was eyed by several monster tribes. However, I gathered some nearby lords the day before yesterday to form an expeditionary force and wiped out 3 monster tribes, including killing as many as 3 third-order war general-level tribe chiefs. Hiss! Someone sharply inhaled a breath of cold air. As relatively new lords, mediocre ones at this time wouldn't even have a single elite-level officer under their command, whereas outstanding lords like themselves often had already fostered 1 or 2 elite-level squads with high-grade elite officers in charge. Even so, they didn't dare to gang up and kill a third-order warlord-level boss, let alone attack a large tribe with a third-order chief in command. Such a tribe was frightful even to think about. The gap between lords indeed grew infinitely wider as time went on. This was actually also related to the era and circumstances. This batch of lords faced pressures far beyond those of previous times and, correspondingly, received more opportunities. At the Hero Festival, individuals like Zhang Loxing and Lu Miamu recruited extraordinary heroes. Once recruited, these heroes were high-ranking elites with great potential. Naturally, in a few months, they had stepped into the Third Order, possessing the power to directly suppress tribal chiefs. Some lords had also acquired upgrade fragments, allowing their own strong warriors to advance even further. The average power level of their period was more than double that of previous batches. Top talents like Lu Miamu and Zhang Loxing were gradually catching up with the new lords from earlier periods. Their achievements, without any boasting or fanfare, were inseparable from the example set by Lord Shepherd himself. Indeed, it was his presence that opened the minds of people like Zhang and gave them goals to pursue, filled their motivation to the brim. The peers from the same period were able to forge ahead courageously, and it truly couldn't be separated from his contributions. Lord Shepherd was extremely gratified. In the distance, the trade meeting was halfway through, and it was time for a mid-session break. Something unprecedented. In the past, there weren't many treasure exchanges or sales, and the gatherings would end in no time, with the lords spending the rest of the time eating, drinking, and boasting. But this time, it was bustling with activity multiple times over. Many lords were troubled by their inability to purchase the treasures they wanted or lacked the channels to sell their treasures at high prices. The famous Great Lord Shen Linglong. Lord Linglong was the host and manager of this meeting. Mu Yuan approached her as soon as she finished her tasks. Lord Linglong also strode towards him, looked him up and down twice. Sis here said you'd definitely be fine. How could a few minor setbacks topple our Tian Yuan brother? She patted Mu Yuan's shoulder with a show of seniority, although her petite stature made the gesture seem more like a child reaching out for a hug from an adult. Of course, no one present dared think that way. She was a great lord, with a strong likelihood of entering the legendary realm, commanding armies with 4 order war generals able to lead 1 or 2 squads. In scenarios where no legendary beings emerged, Lord Linglong was undoubtedly invincible. Moreover, she had a record of leading the army spirit corps to attack and kill monsters from the legendary realm. Not only was she a great lord, but she was also a renowned warrior who had fought her way up. The number of times Mu Yuan and Shen Linglong had met wasn't high, but they were already well acquainted. Combat, after all, was the best form of communication. And he had engaged in an all-out battle with Lord Linglong. Back then, I never expected to be defeated by you. Since you could beat me, how could Tian Yuan bro possibly be toppled by mere monster powers? I have a lot of faith in you. After Shen Linglong finished speaking, Zhang Loxing's expression in the distance was one of complete shock. Did he hear that wrong? Other lords nearby also struggled to maintain their composure, leaning in to listen. In an instant, countless gazes again converged upon them. Mu Yuan. Can we not say things that lead to misunderstandings? I'm someone who prefers to keep a low profile. He added, in balanced mode, it was merely a slight edge. Oh. That's still pretty incredible, though. Rather than say that, the previous statement was not believed at all because it was wholly unrealistic. Even if Tian Yuan was a prodigy and progressed rapidly, it wasn't possible for him to defeat Shen Linglong, a Longmen list powerhouse, in just over half a year. Absolutely unrealistic. However, defeating Lord Linglong under balanced conditions was theoretically possible, and suddenly that version of the story became believable. But even with level equalization, a great lord's skills, foundation, experience, and artistic conception far surpassed those of a new lord. Tian Yuan Gai was really terrifying indeed. But many had not engaged a great lord in equalized combat, so the only person who really understood how formidable Tian Yuan was Shen Linglong herself. With your ability, it may not be long before you can defeat me in a conventional setting, right? She pondered, then gave Mu Yuan another look. Wait, you couldn't beat me now, could you? Surely not. Mr. Mu smiled without saying a word. If there had been no significant progress from Linglong a few months ago, then he highly likely could defeat her. But what could he say? Admitting it would seem too boastful, and Mr. Mu was a man who valued modesty and was above petty vanity. Denying it would be a lie, and Mr. Mu was also an honest lad. The conversation couldn't continue on this topic, but the second half of the trading gathering was about to begin. Shen Linglong said, "Take a look around, maybe there's something you want. Or do you have any treasures you'd like to sell?" "Indeed, I have a few items that I've asked someone to bring over," said Mu Yuan as he moved forward to join in. Inside the secret realm, there were over 100 excellent lords, but more than half of them were mere spectators. Previously, Mu Yuan was one of them. Back then, he had limited funds, and indeed, there wasn't much at the gatherings that caught his eye. Today was different. Shen Linglong walked to the front, cleared her throat, and said, "This meeting will adopt a free trade model, where a deal is concluded once both parties agree and exchange items, with no returns or exchanges. Trading is not limited to tangible goods, high-value intelligence and information can also be traded. If more than one buyer is interested in the same item, the highest offer will prevail. Additionally, lords who are interested may issue purchase requests here." "All right, I have finished reciting my piece. Now let's begin the trading, starting with myself." She took out 3 crescent-shaped items and displayed them on the presentation stand in front of her. "We have here a total of 3 keys to the secret region from our elf's courtyard, which will be auctioned off one by one. Lords who are interested may start bidding." After a lively round of competition, 2 lords successfully bid for these 3 keys. Soon, the second lord took the stage. This lord, known as Great Dragon, was a very powerful and senior lord, and also one at the late stages of dragon cancer. As soon as he appeared, he said, "Old rules, I'm buying dragon soul remnants indefinitely and in unlimited amounts, but only those of the superior grade and above." Ah! Seeing no response, he did not feel disappointed. As long as he managed to purchase a desirable remnant soul every month or two, he considered it a win. He didn't dare to ask for more. Next, the item I want to sell is a material of superior grade called Starlight Stone. This material has multiple uses. Aside from being a main material for constructing miracle buildings, it is also suitable for use in the domains of astrology and stargazing, among others. For this Starlight Stone, I require an exchange with other items of superior grade only, and any difference in value can be compensated with soul crystals. Similarly, if any lord offers an item of higher value, I can compensate the difference with soul crystals or add other valuable items. After Great Dragon Lord finished speaking and a few seconds passed, a lord spoke up. How about I trade with blue bamboo, a material of superior grade, and make up the difference with 100 soul crystals? The Starlight Stone, among the superior grade materials, was considered a luxury because it could be used in astrology and stargazing, and its production was extremely rare, much rarer than the elemental series materials. Lord Yuan remained silent. Because often it wasn't a matter of money, but rather whether the traded items were of any use to the lords themselves. If an item wasn't what they needed, no matter how valuable, it would be meaningless. The blue bamboo, it seemed, had no significance to Great Dragon Lord. Soon, another lord spoke up, presenting a piece of equipment embryo of superior grade. This was a versatile treasure, which somewhat enticed Great Dragon Lord. Yuan spoke, I am also interested in this treasure. How would it be if I offer purest crystal, a material of superior grade, plus 100 soul crystals? What do you think, Great Dragon Lord? Great Dragon Lord hesitated. One could tell he needed the purest crystal, but the adjacent embryo was also a good catch. Yuan then spoke again, purest crystal, plus 200 soul crystals. The neighboring lord's mouth twitched slightly. 200 soul crystals were something most people in attendance could produce without effort, yet this sort of bidding was unusual. These lords earned a lot but also spent much, as they had thousands of mouths to feed at home. If they didn't save, they would run out of money for baby formula. But young and talented lords like himself couldn't yet appreciate this point. Well then, no more competition, no more competition. Yuan joyfully acquired the Starlight Stone. Following that, over a dozen lords came on stage, each offering treasures of at least superior or rare rank, even the lesser items being rare within their ranks. Most lords made trades that left them satisfied. Don't think that just because there were only a little over 100 people here, each one of these individuals controlled a domain, possessing numerous treasures and countless needs. This wasn't a small trade among 100 people, but a large trade involving over 100 domains. If not for the fact that trading through the secret realm would incur even higher taxes than cross-border duties, the lords would have eagerly started trading long ago. After about a dozen people, it was Yuan's turn. He was the last one. Great Dragon Lord's gaze followed the young man walking slowly towards the front. Lord Yuan, are you as exceptional as Lord of Ba Long has touted? He was skeptical. He and the Lord of Ba Long were old friends, sharing insights on the cultivation of Dragon series troops. Now, the Lord of Ba Long had surpassed him, recruiting an epic-level dragon. The Molten Steel Dragon. Soaring straight to the heights of 90,000 li, his path to becoming a legend was not far off. He recognized and even admired Lord of Ba Long. Yet, the same Lord of Ba Long who he admired spoke so highly of Lord Yuan, even claiming that Lord Yuan was the future leader of the Dragon series. This was simply preposterous. Yuan, the name of the domain didn't even include the word dragon. How could he be a dragon lover? He, the great Dragon Lord, would not accept this. Moreover, Yuan was but a rising star. No matter how promising or limitless his potential, he was still a newcomer. Until he truly rose to prominence, he remained a junior. Yuan stood before the display stand, holding the storage ring Duolai had recently brought him. He pondered for a moment. Lately, Yuan territory hadn't explored or developed much, he had little in the way of outdoor earnings. However, he had previously purchased a large stash of treasures from the mysterious merchant. While he could use some of them, using them himself would be somewhat wasteful. It would be better to exchange them for something he needed more. With that thought, he first said, I wish to pay a high price for intelligence, specifically about the Feet Herman Nation and. If any lord has relevant information, you can contact me privately. I am prepared to pay up to 2,000 soul crystal coins as a reward. 2,000. Issuing a purchase request required proof of sufficient financial resources. So Yuan reached into his storage ring, pulling out bags full of shimmering soul crystals, spilling out generously. The lords remained silent. Even if you're rich, you can't just throw money around like this. Doesn't it hurt at all? Yuan indeed wasn't too pained. After all, the generous contribution came from the Goblin Prince. Oh, it couldn't be called a contribution, it was their own hunting harvest, the result of their own hard work. Furthermore, I am also purchasing epic-level monster skeletons. The skeletons don't have to be complete, and high-value parts can be omitted. Starting from 300 soul crystals for a partial skeleton, with a limited number being bought. We can discuss in person. Lastly, I've brought these items today for anyone interested. Lords wishing to acquire them may make an offer. Lord Shepherd took out the items he wanted to sell from the storage ring, presenting them to the lords in attendance one by one. Chapter 308, Cultivation Skills. First up were 4 treasures emitting a faint blue glow, successively placed on the stand. Yuan displayed the information tags, and the lords looked over them one by one. The first item was a material of superior grade. Following that, the second to fourth items were 3 identical superior grade scroll of magic Thunder Dragon Roar. This was an offensive technique whose power limit was insufficient to kill a powerful 4th order boss but could wipe out many elite monsters in a single use. It could be used to target and kill multiple 3rd order large monsters or to sweep through hordes of enemies. Remember, human lords always faced a numerical disadvantage against monsters. This type of one-time use scroll, especially a more common offensive one, was not as valuable as superior grade materials, but the demand for an audience of magic scrolls far surpassed that of a single type of material. Not every lord of materials might need it, but everyone could use scrolls, everyone could stockpile them. At the scene, quite a few lords showed interest, among them notables like the Great Dragon Lord, a standout among experienced lords. They had the ability to slay 3rd order, even 4th order bosses, but that didn't mean they had no need for such scrolls. Their territories were vast, and the exploratory teams and expeditionary teams they formed were numerous. Not every team was capable of challenging 3rd order or 4th order bosses. If they could get a few magic scrolls, the safety of their 2nd tier and 3rd tier teams would be even more secure. The Thunder Dragon Roar technique's main composition is the highly destructive thunder element. Furthermore, it has a shaping ability that allows it to maintain the form of a thunder dragon during the tens of seconds of technique deployment, moving about and locking onto enemies. To be honest, this technique is quite exquisite. If not for its lower energy grade, just superior junior, I reckon it could even eradicate the top 4th order bosses, commented a lord skilled in techniques, genuinely impressed, seemingly gaining much inspiration from it. He could see that this technique was aimed at 3rd order bosses. Unlike some offensive technique scrolls that might miss when cast, this Thunder Dragon Roar, as long as the user locked onto the target with their spiritual power in advance, would automatically pursue and lock onto the enemy. If the user had stronger spiritual power, they could control the Thunder Dragon to perform some sophisticated maneuvers. Speaking of which, the descriptions of these 3 scrolls are exactly the same, as if they were printed with the same template. I wonder where Lord Tianyuan got these scrolls. No, Lord Tianyuan certainly needs such scrolls himself, and it looks like he has far more than 3 superior scrolls, someone mused, envy clear in their voice. Envy. For the 3 scrolls, including the superior grade material, Yuan did not specify that they had to be traded with superior items. He directly sold them for soul crystals. Even though he currently had 4,000 soul crystals gifted by the Goblin Prince, upon reflection, it wasn't much. His house had too many big stomach creatures that needed feeding. Intelligence commissioning, purchasing of epic remnants, etc., all required money. It was indispensable. He used to be reluctant to spend, but now that he had money, he was willing to splurge, and the money quickly dwindled. The 4 items were sold one by one. The Great Dragon Lord, with deeper pockets, directly snapped up 2 scrolls. Lord Shepherd had to admit, "Bro, you're rich." After the 4 treasures were traded, the trade gathering was coming to an end. What followed was eating, drinking, boasting, with the lords eventually leaving. But Tianyuan showed no sign of stepping down from the stage. He reached into his storage ring again, and with a snap, he pulled out 2 more treasures with a faint blue gleam. Although the glow was only light blue, indicating these 2 treasures were of a lower rank within the superior grade, they still instantly attracted the lord's attention. Superior grade remnant souls. Someone is really willing to sell superior remnant souls. Most of those present own superior grade generals. But still, nobody thought they had too many superior troops. Most powerful lords only had 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4, superior grade generals. The addition of even one more such general could significantly enhance the overall strength of their territories. Previously, they could only get one by pulling strings and owing favors, or by spending hard-earned contribution points to exchange on the Taishan covenant. In short, it was extremely difficult to obtain a superior grade remnant soul, so seeing one in this small secret realm was quite surprising and delightful. Black Knights and Rocky Giants were also very practical and strong types of troops, at least more favored than the likes of Goblin Chiefs and leader of Tauren. Immediately, at least half of the Lord's pupils showed fervent interest. However, smaller lords like Lu Miamu and Zhang Loxing weren't very concerned, as they had relatively stable channels of acquisition. Moreover, they hadn't yet fully trained their superior generals. For them, the priority was to train their generals to 3rd order, even 4th order, as soon as possible. Mu Yuan looked around leisurely and began to speak. For these 2 superior remnant souls, my trading requirements are. Naturally, he couldn't just sell them cheaply for soul crystals. Superior remnant souls were not only far more valuable than materials and items of the same grade, but their target market was also very wide, making it a seller's market. Unless the lords present could offer epic remnants, or specific treasures, blueprints, intelligence, he might consider selling the remnant souls. The 2 remnant souls were purchased from a mysterious merchant, and Mu Yuan had originally planned to use them himself, but now that the secret realm had reconnected, and he had opened the trading channel with the outside, using them himself seemed like a waste. He didn't lack 2 superior grade troops, but these 2 remnant souls could potentially be traded for something he truly needed. It's a pity I didn't know the secret realm would reconnect so soon, otherwise, I would have gritted my teeth and bought 1 or 2 superior 3-star remnant souls. The attraction of a superior 3-star remnant soul is far greater than that of an excellent 1-star, enough to make many great lords tempted. However, when considering the value of a superior 3-star remnant soul, the market at Elf's Courtyard seems a bit too small. In the end, these 2 precious remnant souls didn't sell. No lord could come up with a treasure of similar value. Mu Yuan wasn't regretful. I will have a hero stay stationed here in the secret realm for a long time. If any lord obtains a suitable treasure, they can trade with me here anytime. He was only casting out a bait. With this bait, the buyers would inevitably put more effort into finding the treasures he needed, including epic level remains. Only then did the trading gathering come to a satisfactory conclusion, and the lords left content. However, many kept casting frequent glances his way, making Mr. Mu feel somewhat uncomfortable. Is having 2 superior remnant souls worth such a fuss? Afterward, Mu Yuan continued to shoot the breeze with the lords he was more familiar with, as Zhang chatted extensively about his glorious achievements. Thinking back to that day, I was so brave that I just stabbed at the tribal chieftain with a spear. I stabbed him so hard he howled. Under my lead, we achieved one glorious battle after another. Subtracting 90% of the boastful content, Zhang Loxing was indeed fierce. Their progress this term far surpassed previous terms. And now, Zhang Loxing ranked among the top 10 among his peers. Boss Tian Yuan, your victories must be remarkable too. Well, I just happened to encounter a surviving force from a former civilization and sniped a powerful enemy, that's all. A force from a former civilization? That's as rare as pandas, I'd really like to see that. It's nothing special. Forces like the Holy Griffin Empire, Star Luo Holy Palace, Kizuo Anta Federation, and so on have been handed down since ancient times. It's just that they aren't remnants, they are great nation-level forces that have preserved themselves very intact. But these forces were too remote for them. Lords and powerful beings from the other 6 great nations rarely had the chance to encounter them, let alone those in more central and safer regions of the continent. For most people, including lords, their understanding of nations like the Holy Griffin Empire came from very limited texts. Mu Yuan didn't know much either, he only remembered the grand scene of angels lining up when a major figure from the Holy Griffin Empire visited the Dragon Courtyard a few months ago. Someday, I too will arrange for a giant dragon to cover the skies. Before leaving, Mu Yuan entrusted Lu Miamu to purchase some materials needed for the legendary realm breakthrough. Such materials were usually available in larger cities, so procurement wasn't difficult. Legendary breakthrough material. Just making preparations in advance. If I have extra money, I'll prepare more. It's always good to be cautious, just in case the secret realm's channel is cut off again, we won't be caught anxious, right? The others had a moment of realization. It's no wonder he's the Yuan giant, such detailed future planning, even beginning preparations for the distant legendary realm breakthrough well ahead of time. It's no surprise he stands far above them, where they can't even catch a glimpse of his back. They still had so much to learn. But just now, they actually had the ridiculous thought, the absurd idea that could the Yuan giant be close to breaking through to the legendary realm? How preposterous! How could they conceive such an idea? Mu Yuan gave Lu Miamu a sum of money and a fee for the procurement service. For him, it didn't matter who he entrusted the task to, of course, it was more reliable to entrust it to someone familiar, and let none other than friends profit from it. Zhang Loxing's expression was a mix of grievance and bemusement. To be honest, Mu Yuan had initially planned to entrust Zhang, since he was swift with errands, but hasn't your territory also shifted outward? Now, it's not so easy for you to travel to key regional towns, is it? You're right, boss, but still, it's frustrating. I'm supposed to be the #1 lackey of Boss Yuan. Mu Yuan sent Zhang Loxing a red envelope and asked him to continue collecting information. Any and all news, big or small, he was not picky. When it came to staying well informed, Zhang could leave Lu Miamu, that homebody, far behind. If you can get some more powerful intelligence, I will give you a 3-star remnant soul in a few months. He said. Zhang Loxing. Cough cough, I'm not particularly craving for a remnant soul, but I, Zhang, will definitely get the job done as per your orders, boss. He pondered for a moment and then said, I've also asked friends to inquire about the situation in Shilling Town, but the information is not flowing smoothly these days, so I only know the general situation. It's said that Shilling Town has also been relocated, but for now, there are no major issues, and some big shots from the Pioneer Group are rushing to Shilling Town. In the central area of Shilling Town. On the 3rd floor of the Cultivate Heart Pavilion, a superior-grade cultivation building, a woman with a high ponytail and wearing a snug outfit sits with her eyes closed. Around her, arrows gleaming with pale blue starlight move in mysterious trajectories, seemingly in harmony with some profound principles, mysterious and beautiful. She is 17, practicing the heart power. 17, in her God Archer stage, awakened the talent Mind Arrow. In the ranks of superior-grade soldiers, this talent would be deemed quite high-class, rare, excellent, and practical. But among the category of epic lives, a talent like Mind Arrow would be considered rather common. This type of common talent, a certain general had awakened at least 10 of. But 17 had an exceptional gift for the Tao of the Soul, and she had maximized and transcended the potential of Mind Arrow very early on. With this as her foundation, she had pried open the gate to the Tao of the Soul. However, the Tao of the Soul is difficult to enter, master, and advance in. 17, considering herself slow-witted, could only keep practicing and exploring, stumbling forward as she progressed. Latterly, she temporarily assumed the position of offering in Shilling Town, which allowed her to freely use the town's cultivation buildings. The message inside the brocade bag given by Lord said, "We will take action when the time is critical, so use these miracle buildings as needed, it's all a reasonable reward. What you need to do is enhance your strength as much as possible, as some things can only be done with sufficient power." After some thought, she agreed. If she were already a legend, could she go and find the Great Lord? Thus, 17 kept training. Thanks to the superabundant cultivation gift pack from Mayor Kui Long, her progress was swift. She only felt that using the cultivation resources of 10 or dozens of people on herself was too wasteful. She wanted to take them back and give them to her brothers and sisters, but remembering the words in the brocade bag from Lord, she still trained with all her might. As an officially heavily invested frontline important town, not only does Shilling Town possess strong defensive capabilities, it also has many cultivation buildings. All these are investments by the officials. Given time, Shilling Town could very well become the second Panchi city. The Cultivate Heart Pavilion is the highest level cultivation building in Shilling Town, providing benefits like advanced concentration, soul cleansing, and insight enhancement. It can be used by the strong to learn and practice skills and also help with breakthroughs. For 17, the most significant effect of Cultivate Heart Pavilion was that it strengthened her heart power. So, she began to cultivate her heart while she trained. After repeating the training and refining it hundreds of times, 17 gradually figured out a set of heart cultivation methods suitable for herself. Hard print engraving method. Using the arrow as her pen, she outlined mysterious patterns, engraving pictures under the invisible heavens and earth. Throughout the process, she had to control the arrows with her heart power. Heart power usually cannot interfere with reality, but thanks to this miracle building, and her connection with the starlight arrows and the 10,000 arrows treasure, 17 turned the impossible possible. Every time she completed an engraving, her heart strength would noticeably increase by a fraction. As though there were no limits. Her practice was not smooth, but full of bumps. Sometimes, if the final stroke was off, the whole cultivation process was in vain. When she successfully engraved 10 heart print drawings in a row, she seemed to reach a new level of enlightenment. Meanwhile, just as Lord Shepherd stepped out the secret realm's gate, 2 notifications rang in his ears. Notice, you have paid a total of 65.9 soul crystals for cross-realm taxes. Notice, your soldier 17 has created her own cultivation skill heart print engraving. Damn! Oh! Chapter 309, The Conquest Battle. 2 days later, in Tianyuan territory. Mu Yuan received a message from the scouting team. Ever since the assassination of the Goblin Prince and the subsequent stabilization of the region, Lord Shepherd had changed his strategy. He reactivated several scouting squads, aiming to keep a tight grip on the movements of the Jackal Man and other tribes. For this purpose, he was willing to sacrifice a bit of concealment. Today, numerous Jackal Man patrol teams left Tribe 1, seemingly in search of something. Mu Yuan pondered. If the Jackal Man tribes were to search southwards in a sweeping manner, it would only be a matter of time before they discovered Tianyuan territory. But even when he ambushed the Goblin Prince, he had anticipated such a turn of events. Prepare for war. Aooo. Damn it. For Tianyuan. Serio, Bone 2, Yuda, and others, a group of belligerent commanders howled with battle lust. But Lord Shepherd said, wait 2 more days. Serio, Ao. Mu Yuan decided to wait 2 days, one was to delay as much as possible, gaining a day if possible, and the other was to prepare for war. Although the Jackal Man tribes are nothing but watchdogs and pawns left outside by the overlord powers, we do not know what lies within them. It is not impossible that we could encounter a legend. We must go all out. In the meantime, Mu Yuan went to the human race army camp and summoned 2 Dragon Force swordsmen who had performed excellently, endowing them with Evo power. They soon evolved into epic 1-star lives, giant dragon swordsmen. They possessed physiques comparable to giant dragons and could even transform into the form of a dragon to unleash devastating dragon breath when necessary. Lord, there's a message from the secret realm. A lord is offering to trade the remains of an epic level life form, the remnants of a purgatory flame demon. Xilu, who was stationed in Elf's courtyard, came rushing out. They are specifically asking to exchange for the rocky giant remnant soul. The remains of the purgatory flame demon, if unexceptional, would have had the most valuable materials stripped from it already, greatly reducing its worth. Mu Yuan didn't mind. If it were a complete epic carcass, it would be too difficult for him to acquire, and the value would be much higher. To him, the remnants were just right. He looked at Xilu, tell them we can make the trade. Xilu saluted, alrighty. Then she added, Lord, I would like to join tomorrow's battle as well. Fine then. The next day, within Tianyuan territory, Mu Yuan was mustering the troops. The key to this operation is speed. Our plan is as follows, this way, and this way. Tianyuan territory would deploy 2 forces, one led by commanders to infiltrate the Jackal Man tribe and directly assassinate its leader. The other, led by the main forces, would eliminate as many Jackal Man warriors as possible. That was the rough tactic. The specific tactics could be adjusted in 128 different ways according to the actual situation. At the same time, in the Feet Herman nation, the Queen furrowed her brow. The Jackal Man tribes have been acting strangely recently. Could it be related to that human lord? Regardless, scout further and keep a close watch on the Jackal Man tribe's movements. Also, don't underestimate this Jackal Man tribe. One of the overlord powers originated from the Jackal Man, and this tribe has received much support from them, with many strong individuals within. Without my personal intervention, it would be difficult for our Feet Herman nation to take down this Jackal Man tribe without significant losses, she mused. Several strong feather court guards swallowed hard, and after a long pause, muttered in agreement, understood, we will keep this in mind. At dawn's first light, with the fog clear and bright, The citizens of Tianyuan town gradually arose from their beds to start a new day. In the northern part of the territory, at the wide-open North City Gate, 2 well-equipped and battle-hardened legions were slowly marching out. The Undead Legion and the Human Race Legion. To this day, the size of the Undead Legion had expanded to 800, mainly comprised of skeleton morticians and evil spirits. The Human Race Legion also grew to a strength of 650, its combined power having multiplied countless times over. Mu Yuan stood at the forefront of the troops. By his side were General Deadbone, General Duo Lai, Yuda, Xi Lu, Hong Yi, and other powerhouses. The battle plan had been simulated many times, and the troops had been ready for the past 2 days. Now, no further words were needed, and with a grand wave of his hand, he commanded, "Move out." Silently and swiftly, the elites vanished into the forest and mist, leaving only the rustling wind behind. Leading the conquest legions were several small teams with rich exploration experience and high levels and ranks. Skeleton Warriors Team, Ghost General Team. Whoosh! A Ghost General, looking no different from a human, leaped rapidly through the treetops without leaving any trace or stirring a breeze. He was a ghost. Suddenly, he halted and used the spiritual link network to send a signal with his mind. Enemy, small squad, elite. Through the leaves, one could see a team of about a dozen or so jackal men, moving along casually. They seemed lax in discipline, which was typical for monsters. This ghost general, who had taken general education classes, recognized the jackal man leading the group. It wore a fine leather jacket with 2 feathers protruding from its helmet. It was a monster sub-leader. Either it was at the peak of the 2nd order or it had already stepped into the 3rd order. The ghost general could not determine the enemy's exact level through observation and perception, but with the help of teammates, he soon noticed several jackal man prowlers moving in a more covered manner. As the captain of this reconnaissance team, after ruminating for 2.5 seconds, he spoke in the spiritual channel, Tactic 3, Position 6. 226 seconds later, the jackal man squad passed by beneath the trees. The ghost general leaped toward the ground, and upon reaching mid-air, he stopped concealing his aura. The jackal men realized something was amiss and looked up, just as the ghost general's pupils burst into a brilliant, sapphire blue light. Skill, Nightmare Pupil Prison. A dozen jackal men instantly became bewildered, and nearby, rustlings were heard in the shrubbery as bone spurs, sharp as arrows, pierced through them. At the same time, thud, thud, thud. In 3 other places, 3 jackal man nocturnes, who had just become alert, had their throats slashed in the span of a second. Similar scenes were not only happening on the path where the punishment army advanced. Over the past 2 days, Mu Yuan had dispatched several elite special operations squads to specific locations to stand by. At this moment, several squads, moving from the outside in, were reaping the lives of the jackal men. When the prepared assailant meets the unsuspecting, especially with a just cause and a tactical advantage in strength, the special operations squads advanced swiftly. The main army did as well. A few hours later, Mu Yuan and his men arrived 10 kilometers outside the jackal men's tribe. The number 1 jackal man tribe was built amid a range of mountains, on a piece of high yet flat land. The area was spacious enough to accommodate the construction of a small city and had the advantage of being easy to defend but difficult to assault. A treasured location from a military standpoint. From a distance, the only access was a winding mountain path leading to towering rock walls. In a relatively flat area at the base of the mountain, fields were scattered haphazardly. The cultivators were goblins, dwarves, half-orcs, and others in shackles. Mu Yuan also saw a significant number of ragged humans. On the side, some jackal men taskmasters wielded whips, cracking them continuously. These fields were in such disrepair that one would doubt any harvest was possible. At the bottom of the mountain, the goblin taskmasters still laughed heartily. At the top of the mountain, the thick city gates were creaking shut, with visibly more jackal man warriors ascending the walls, surveying the surroundings with vigilant eyes. Higher up, some elite jackal men were patrolling back and forth, riding on a species of black feathered creatures, while others flew off into the distance. It looks like the jackal men's tribe has noticed something to a certain extent, but that doesn't matter, the plan proceeds as usual. The gates closed, the mountainsides steep. If this were a world where supernatural power was not prominent, perhaps an army of several 100,000 would not be able to take down this small tribe, but this is the eternal world, and Tianyuan territory is now well armed and powerful. It is no longer like the old days, when they had to rack their brains to deal with a mere encampment. The times have changed. They could blast through the walls, or they could fly over them. However, as for what kind of arrangements were inside the tribe, where the chieftain was, and whether there was anyone from the legendary realm inside, Yuan had no way of knowing. Even General Deadbone thought that to infiltrate such a large tribe single-handedly, one that had been developed over 10 to dozens of years with all sorts of traps and surveillance in place, posed no small risk. Risk of failing to infiltrate. Lord Shepherd had more reliable, more efficient, and more direct means. It's you, Eye of Divine Right. Observe, centered on me, extending 10.6 kilometers ahead. In Tianyuan territory, inside the Eye of Divine Right structure, Yuan and I Lo stood in front of a massive observation mirror, beginning to calibrate and enter the command. Notice, Scouting Eye of Heaven usage count 1, slowly recovering. Soon. The huge observation mirror cleared of mist, revealing an aerial view of the Jackal Men's tribe. With a physical anchor, the Eye of Heaven pinpointed the Jackal Men's tribe with great accuracy, capturing the entire visage of the tribe within its scope. On the outermost perimeter of the tribe were the crooked but solid rock walls. From the outside, the tribe looked large and otherwise normal, but from a bird's eye view, one could see. Within the tribe, several blood ponds bubbled and belched strange bubbles, seemingly producing portions of massive bodies. Yuan noticed that, on one side of the tribe, in an area resembling a barracks, there were several giant jackal men of a brownish-red complexion squatting. Jackal men's war machines, he thought. Besides these, he also saw various areas within the tribe hosting tall towers fashioned from flesh. The towers were eerie, filled with danger and ominousness. Likely special defensive structures of the Jackal men's tribe, crucial to be wary of. Indeed, this tribe is far from ordinary as it seems on the surface. With the Eye of Heaven's observations up to this point, Yuan had a clear understanding of the entire tribe. This method of reconnaissance was 100 times more efficient and safer than infiltrating alone or using battle falcons for scouting. And yet, this was still not the limit of the Eye of Heaven's probing capabilities. Yuan continued to issue commands on the control panel, and soon, the map zoomed out, revealing numerous large and small luminous dots. These were energy level responses. And his greatest reliance was on this as well. Even General Deadbone initially couldn't escape the scrutiny of the Eye of Heaven, let alone the Jackal men. Third-order monsters, a total of 122, each one a minor leader or chieftain. Fourth-order head monsters, there are 33, mainly concentrated in this area. Only 33. Yuan felt it was a bit too few, or was he becoming complacent? When they were eradicating the nest of filth, the number of fourth-order monsters they faced at the same time was certainly more than a mere 33. Of course, there are differences between fourth-order creatures. Those he had faced before were mostly unit-type fourth order, wild fourth order, low-intelligence fourth order. The fourth order within the Jackal man tribe could be expected to have some strong warriors. Besides, within the tribe, there were some energy responses that were unusually large in quantity. But there were no legends. After confirming several times, Yuan took a deep breath and declared, the campaign to subjugate the Jackal man tribe, officially begins. Roar! The wind howled, and dark clouds covered the sun. A colossal creature spread its wings beneath the dark clouds, its deep blue scales glinting with a cold light, as if to freeze the very earth and sky. Vanguard Chief Invincible Dragon of the World, Serio, entered the battlefield. It immediately attracted a flurry of glances and firepower. Soon, from two different areas, the Undead Legion and the human race's army rushed out, with arrows quickly cleaving through the air from afar. The fields at the base of the mountain were thrown into turmoil as the Jackal man overseers roared orders. Shackled slaves charged forward without a hint of fear. Yuan did not hold back. Some of the slaves were human, their eyes bloodshot beneath tattered clothes. They were tainted through and through by filth, no different from monsters. War erupted in an instant. One side was the Tianyuan Legion, not numerous but each a super elite. The other, the Jackal man tribe that had occupied this land for countless years, numerous in number, their eyes blood red, completely boiling with fervor. Meanwhile, Deadbone, Duolai, Yuta and others were infiltrating the tribe in a more low-key manner. In the heart of the Jackal man tribe, the chieftain's tent. Chieftain Lang Mi was drinking. He was well versed in the ways of the human race, having dismembered dozens of humans years ago and learned from them the wonders of human civilization. Since then, he personally presided over building this luxurious residence. He had wanted to call this place the City Lord's Mansion and the tribe the City of Jackal Men, but he couldn't. I don't know why those old immortals in the tribe are so cautious. Who else in this region would dare provoke the Jackal Men? He drank his wine elegantly, his arms wrapped around two robust and beautiful female Jackal Men. Suddenly, a confidant burst in. Chieftain, we are under attack. I am already aware, in 30 minutes, I want to see the results, he replied. Yes. 2 minutes later. Chieftain, the enemy has breached the city wall and has slain our 4 leaders, someone reported. Chieftain Lang Mi frowned slightly. Call number 3 and number 2 here. Another 2 minutes passed. Chieftain, the enemy has penetrated Flesh Fort, crossed Bloodwater Bridge, and is heading this way, the report came. The chieftain stood up abruptly, ready to speak. Boom! The luxurious building, as if crushed by some immense weight, shattered abruptly. Several silhouettes stood against the light from the open sky. Are you the chieftain? Chapter 310, Big Explosion. The chieftain of the Jackal Man tribe, Lang Mi, narrowed his eyes as he looked toward the uninvited guests who had breached half the tribe and made their way here. Only a few people. His unease gradually subsided. None of these people were legendary, it seemed that they crossed over by using some sort of artifact and special methods to conceal their aura. But to a non-legendary, what could a mere few do to him? He, Lang Mi himself, was a powerful being with the potential to become legendary. Among all the mortal realm powerhouses within the Fang of the Jackal Wolf faction, he ranked within the top 3. If not for this, he wouldn't have been entrusted with such an important task, to manage the entire Jackal Man tribe and act as their eye to the outside world. Lang Mi just couldn't figure it out, where did the enemies daring to oppose the Fang of the Jackal Wolf come from? Were they outsiders from distant lands? State your names. He asked with narrowed eyes, also stalling for time. This was the heartland of their tribe, surrounded by his family's powerhouses. The advantage was his. And far away, the 6 towering towers of flesh and blood that were constructed around the mansion slowly began to move. Activating the towers of flesh and blood took some time, which they had not had earlier, but now preparations were complete. From the tips of the maroon-colored towers, a giant eyeball emerged and slowly opened, bearing great horror and ominousness. Chieftain Lang Mi's lips slightly curled upward. Pfft! A bone blade penetrated from behind his heart, as effortlessly as tearing through cardboard, easily ripping through his superior-grade armor that radiated with a precious glow, then tearing through the thick fur, the tough flesh, piercing and shattering the beating heart, leaving behind a spreading, deathly grey-black. In the blink of an eye, a silver-white, jade-like, sharp and smooth bone sword blade emerged from the chest of the Jackal Man chieftain, untainted by any impurity, with only blood dripping down, pooling into a pond. Chieftain Lang Mi's eyes widened in shock, struggling to move, his throat convulsing. A second bone sword decapitated him. The Jackal Man chieftain, who had barely made an appearance for half a chapter without getting a chance to act, was dead. Behind him stood a figure in armor that had a very low presence, almost as if non-existent. Dead Bone. Dead Bone glanced at the enemy, who was now thoroughly dead, and heaved a slight sigh of relief. Finally killed the first major enemy. It wasn't easy. Duo Lai. Ah, right. Soon. The second and third leaders of the Jackal Man tribe arrived one after another, and like the great chieftain, met their end. In the meantime, several third order and 4 order strongmen of the tribe were also killed, more than 20 in total. They struck swiftly, accurately, and ruthlessly. The primary figures of the Jackal Man tribe were roughly dealt with. But the mission of our battle is to completely annihilate the entire Jackal Man tribe, at least, not a single wise wolfman of 3rd order and above can escape. Our task is still a heavy one. Dead Bones said. Duo Lai didn't care so much, with the head-hunting operation over, it was now time for General Duo Lai to perform. At the city gates. Bone 4 commanded the Undead Legion. The army soul embryo manifested above, and the entire legion rode upon dark clouds, soaring upward. They were enveloped in midair by swirling black mist, obscuring everything except pairs of eyes that shone with a ghastly blue light. They moved in unison, with hundreds of skeleton morticians and skeleton generals led by skeleton lords, all swinging down their bone swords together. In an instant, Devil Flame soared to the sky, transforming into pitch-black sword light that tore through heaven and earth. Boom! Rocks tumbled and shattered, watchtowers and arrow towers also rapidly cracked and collapsed under the impact. The undead legion breached the city walls. And from all around, countless jackal men and other monsters emerged from their wooden and stone buildings or beneath the ground, roaring as they lunged forward. As time passed, the red in their eyes grew more pronounced, and the aura on their bodies became more furious. It's order spirits. A high-order wise wolfman judged at a glance. In such a large-scale war, the aura of the Tianyuan Legion could not be concealed, but as long as all enemies were annihilated, there would be no chance for secrets to leak. June soared high into the sky, whipping up an azure hurricane that spanned hundreds of meters in all directions. The hurricane roared, turning the main entrance of the tribe upside down. Many jackal men who were rushing to the battlefield were immediately knocked off their feet. Tremble, for this is Lord Jun's power. Jun's keen eyes surveyed the surroundings, fixing on a powerful four-order jackal man leader. Suddenly, its feathers bristled. A flesh tower stood 2,000 meters away, and atop it, an eerie eye of flesh suddenly opened wide. The pupil focused on June, directing a chilling gaze. It was merely a gaze. Yet not just a gaze. In that moment, at the focus of the eye of flesh on Jun's right wing, the flesh spontaneously began writhing and burst through the feathers, growing smooth, pale red flesh sprouts. The flesh sprouts grew rapidly as if alive, devouring Jun's flesh and growing larger. On its right wing, the crimson flesh sprouts continued to spread. Screech! Screech! Damn it! What's happening? June flapped its wings desperately, but to no avail. The right wing seemed about to detach from its body. In fear, it hurriedly landed, but even as it gathered its wind power to resist, it only reduced the activity of the flesh sprouts. It couldn't eliminate them or even stop them from spreading. Unless, it was willing to be ruthless and completely cut off its own right wing. June is still a baby, and can't bear to do this. It wasn't until the chief Nanny Laney rushed over that she was able to purify the flesh factors on Jun's body with her vast holy light power. At the same moment June was attacked, the undead legion, with its grand momentum, also fell under the assault of the Eye of Flesh. The undead legion reported no harm. The damage they sustained was first weakened by the power of the legion, then distributed among hundreds of teammates. The fierce attacks from the enemy felt like a gentle breeze to the undead. Even if they lost a few bones, it meant nothing to them, they could immediately reconnect them and continue fighting. Besides, Bone 2 wasn't with the undead legion. It was breaking into the Jackal Man tribe from another location, cutting down countless enemies like an unparalleled warlord. It too was subjected to the gaze of the Eye of Flesh. Fleshy buds began to grow on Bone 2, but like rootless trees, they couldn't draw nutrients and quickly withered. Bone 2 watched this happen and fell into thought. What were the enemies doing? Was this some kind of joke? Unable to figure it out, it decided not to dwell on it and continued to slaughter, wielding its sword. In the heart of the tribal area, 6 flesh towers stood. Duo Lai and others were right in the center of the Eye of Flesh's gaze area. Before the Eye of Flesh opened, General Duo Lai, who had inherited Lord's spirit of no need for martial dignity when fighting monsters, had already made the first move. With a thunderbolt in hand, he cast with a chanting speed far exceeding that of a fourth-order magic profession, unleashing 6 thunderous beams of light. Thunder glow struck the flesh towers. The towers crackled with lightning, disintegrated inch by inch but also regenerated inch by inch. Duo Lai was somewhat surprised. A single bolt from him could destroy a large area, and rare level walls would shatter instantly, yet he couldn't destroy, or even disturb the distant flesh towers. The Eye of Flesh opened. This Eye of Flesh seemed to be of a higher level, with blood waves surging in its pupils, casting the surrounding world in a faint crimson hue. General Duo Lai instinctively sensed danger. He fought on instinct, his mind not quick, but he received hints from the Lord. I transform. Duo Lai quickly morphed into a skeleton. He wasn't used to the skeleton form, as it did not allow him to use his full combat power. His strongest forms were his slime form, girl form, and the form of a girl riding a slime. Still, his other mimicry forms were perfect. When he mimicked a skeleton, he became a skeleton just then. The fleshy buds passed through the bones, not sticking to him in the slightest. Not far away, Hong Yi, who was aiding the team, floated around in a smaller form, also largely unaffected by the light from the Eye of Flesh. Only Yuta. Yuta was purely, he wasn't purely human race either, but Yuta had a very freshly alive flesh body. His body was the perfect breeding ground for flesh buds. No less than 4 gazes from the pupils focused on him. At that moment, Yuda's hair stood on end and his bushy eyebrows shot up. He stomped, and stones scattered in all directions. The gazes passed through his afterimage. It seemed as though fleshy buds were sprouting in the air, spreading and chasing his afterimages, but they could never catch up. Even though the gaze was too fast to avoid, Yuda still moved quickly to dodge it based on his instinctive warning. The gaze was always a step behind him. He leaped in front of a flesh tower, charged up, and struck out with a punch. The tower first dented inward, then bulged out from the back, and exploded. Much like a giant pustule bursting, blood sprayed in all directions. Meanwhile, Yuda transformed mid-punch, each strike causing the earth to tremble and the flesh to explode bit by bit. Seconds later, normal state Yuda demolished the first flesh tower. Flesh towers not only have quirky attack methods but are also tough to take down. This defense structure is quite formidable, thought Yuan. Despite the eye of flesh's gaze being limited, its method of attack was very peculiar, and its effects were almost impossible to defend against. Even a being from the legendary realm could be fatally gazed at by multiple eyes if caught off guard. The Jackal Man tribe, indeed terrifying. So, what about the Wolfman overlord behind them? The 8th minute into the war, the 4 Dead Bones had killed over 100 Third Order and Fourth Order powerful monsters. With Dead Bone present, they were not afraid of being surrounded. General Dead Bone alone was equivalent to an army. Boom! Duo light turned around. Behind him, dazzling red and blue light bloomed, engulfing an area of 100 meters and annihilating everything within it. The 20th minute into the war. Bone 4 temporarily stopped the power of Army Soul Resonance. On such an intensely fierce battlefield, their resonance could only last for less than half an hour. It felt that it was necessary to save some power for potential emergencies. Without the power of Army Spirit, the Undead Legion, engulfed by enemy forces, started to struggle. At this time, the second main force of the human race took over and exchanged positions with the Undead Legion. The Undead Legion moved to the second line. The 30th minute into the war. By now, the wise wolfmen had started to sense that something was amiss. It seemed that it was always their tribe dying in battle, and their speed of killing living beings was very limited. Moreover, their entire Jackal Man tribe was in utter chaos. Lower to middle-ranked Jackal men and other monsters all rushed in with blood-red eyes. Utterly without order, utterly without strategy. Often, the monsters would clash with one another, resulting in a tumultuous mess. Where is the chieftain? Where are the second and third leaders, up to the 10th leader? The chieftains with commanding power, each one of them, were not present. The lesser ones completely lost their reason in front of the scent of living beings. Thinking of this, the wise wolf man already harbored thoughts of retreat. In his mind echoed a demonic voice, urging him to charge forward, to leap at the prey, to tear into the flesh and blood of living creatures. But he was an old slicker among the wolfmen, well versed in the art of slacking, capable of repressing his bloody instincts. He looked around, scaled a cliff, and escaped down a deserted slope towards an unpeopled rear flank. Until shadows overtook him, and a cyan wind wrapped around him from all sides. He lost consciousness. The war had been raging for 40 minutes. The resistance of the Jackal Man tribe had gradually weakened, but apart from a few wise wolfmen, the rest of the monsters were like zombies, viciously unafraid of death, fighting till the last moment. To be fair, the type of troops was fierce, but this kind retained some habits of their race before life, and they also required orders from a lord to fight continuously for 3 days and nights. Whereas monsters, at the scent of living beings, would howl and charge forth. The two were completely incompatible forms of life. By the end, the main forces of various corps were already quite exhausted, with Dead Bone and a few others bearing the brunt of the pressure and attracting the most fire, depleting them significantly. There are over 20,000 monsters in total. This number might be far less than the siege wave, but the wave contained a large number of minor monsters just to make up the numbers. Here, more than half are elites. Slaughtering more than 20,000 pigs would not be easy, let alone 20,000 monsters capable of launching sneak attacks and slashing out blade beams to cast fireballs. Even more difficult to deal with were the various defensive measures, including the tower of flesh and blood within, and some of the larger flesh monsters gathered together. Fortunately, it seems the Jackal men still had some war machines that they hadn't had time to deploy. Dozens of escaping Jackal men were also detected and killed one by one through the Sky Eye. For this, the 3 uses of infinite range Sky Eye had been exhausted. Yuan frowned slightly. To attack such a large tribe, or rather, monster city, their intention to conquer and kill any escaping monsters was indeed a bit strained. Nevertheless, the number 1 Jackal Man tribe was the largest tribe closest to their Yuan territory. In any case, plucking out the eyes of a Jackal Man overlord was always a benefit. He had a second purpose as well. Previously, due to the Jackal Men's activities in the vicinity, their Yuan territory exploratory team seldom went out. It had been nearly half a month since the territory had a proper exploratory profit, surviving on old savings. He needed income from medicinal herbs, minerals, and so on. And here, Yuan walked into the Jackal Man tribe, where the bloody scent reached the sky. Buildings collapsed all around, but in the blood water twinkled countless shiny points, which were tiny grains of soul sand exuding from the bodies of monsters. Occasionally, some light balls floated above it. Both white and green lights were present. With a casual sweep, he found no less than 10 rare level remnant souls. It was a substantial loot. And the real loot had not yet begun. The mark on the back of his hand was growing increasingly hot, reminding him that there were stains worth purifying here. Possibly more than one. Lord Xilu, bathed in blood with wings on his back, descended from mid-air. Sister Duolai says she has found quite a few good things, they're mineral deposits. There are mines inside the Jackal Man tribe, and not just one.